When did you walk away from mortal peril, completely unharmed? Once, as a kid, I was in the backyard swimming while my family was nearby eating dinner at a round table. Most of them had their backs to me, but I was like 11 and an experienced swimmer. I got into a toddler's float with leg holes. It ended up flipping over and I was stuck in. My legs wouldn't come out of the leg holes. I kicked and thrashed as much as I could, but I was so stuck. And you can't hear someone screaming underwater. So many thoughts ran through my head. Mostly how sad I was that my parents were about to find me dead in a matter of minutes, and how they'd never forgive themselves for allowing me to silently drown as they talked with their friends. I tried one more time to kick out with all of my might. One leg slipped out and I was able to get the other out. I was fine. Totally freaking spooked, but physically okay. I was driving home from college on one of those highways with only one line in either direction and no shoulder. A guy in the oncoming lane didn't see me as I was in a small car. He thought he could pass 4 18-wheelers in one go and pulled into my lane doing at least 90. There was nowhere for me to go. He flew off into the ditch to avoid hitting me head-on and likely did severe damage to his car, but I lived. I was drunk and running in the woods when bam, barbed wire straight to the throat. The last thing I remember was I couldn't breathe and was passing out, and there was blood squirting from my neck. I woke up an hour later and walked home looking like a murder victim. My boyfriend finally woke me up shortly after we'd fallen asleep in a small upstairs room that had a smoldering fire. After we collapsed on the floor and couldn't find the door that wasn't even 5 feet away, we kept hitting walls and corners and started to not comprehend anything. After feeling like I was baking in an oven, I laid my head down on the floor, thinking I'd never see my son again and how sad it was to die. It felt like an eternity and very lonely. My boyfriend somehow found his phone on the floor and called 911. The fire department showed up in what felt like 2 seconds, but couldn't break down the front door. They shined the flashlight up to the window so he could kick out the AC unit, which he did. They finally came upstairs and we crawled to them and they took us straight to the burn unit, since they didn't know what shape we were in. I'm pretty sure the entire hospital staff toured through our rooms since they've never seen anyone make it out and look the way we did. Both just painted black by the fumes, but completely, miraculously unharmed, as if a Looney Tunes bomb went off in our faces. The narrator really hopes that somehow you beat the odds and didn't get any lasting respiratory or brain damage from that level of fumigation, but given that you've written a fairly coherent post all these years later, it would seem like you might have actually gotten off scot-free. Congratulations! I ate one of those Brux oval-shaped hard candies, I think they were called sparklets, at home alone when I was 6. It got stuck in my throat. I stood there in shock for a few seconds as I started to realize I couldn't breathe. I ran crazily around the room and ended up colliding hard into the back of the couch, which caused the candy to go flying out. Best accidental Heimlich ever. I had a paintball fight on Christmas morning with 2 cousins and their neighbor kid at around 13 years old, with our brand new markers we got as gifts. The neighbor got mad, ran home and came back with a shotty and pointed it at my face. All I remember is looking at the ground and waiting to die. This kid was 11 or 12. He did have his own paintball marker and had already shot me a couple of times before I got him. He was my cousin's neighbor. I think it was the first time I'd ever met him. It was 20-ish years ago, as I'm 33 now, so I can't even remember if I told my parents. I don't know if anything happened to him or not. I'll ask my cousin. Okay, update. We never told my parents. Maybe we were scared of retaliation? I know I never touched that paintball marker again, though. I'm a skier. On a few occasions, I've caught an edge at a pretty high speed, like 50 miles per hour or more. That moment where you feel both skis leave the ground when they're not supposed to is horrifying. Somehow I've never had anything more than some moderate whiplash and a sprained wrist. Knock on wood. Even if it's not close to dying, you just never know 100% if you land safely or end up limping around with 2 messed knees for the rest of your life. That's probably what makes skiing so exciting. Stay safe, fellow skiers. I was a single-digit age, and for some reason I removed my life jacket while on our family's boat with my parents. I was attempting to sit on the little board that sticks off the back for climbing into when I toppled off into the water. I was still in swimming classes at the time and couldn't do much else but doggy paddle. I was bobbing up and down in the water and I couldn't get enough air in to scream between coming up for air. I was little and getting panicked and tired really quickly and began to sink, one surfacing at a time, until I couldn't surface anymore and I realized I was done. I thought about my parents on the boat who didn't know that I was gone and wondered when they'd realize I was missing and if they'd find me. A big grey fish swam by, and then I saw my mum dive in just as everything went dark. I woke up on the boat in a towel. My tyre popped going over a 2-lane road with steep drops on each side. My car jerked to the side hard and my car went sideways. Half of it hung over the side and luckily it's low, so it bottomed out. I climbed into the back seat and jumped out the back door. Some dude in a truck pulled me out and I drove on a flat to the other side and swapped my tyre out. I swear it's always just some guy in a truck ready to help. They're either the best people or the worst. The hood on my car came open at about 60 on the highway and completely blocked my sight in heavy traffic. I panicked and jerked the wheel a little bit, which caused me to fishtail. I crap you not, my driver's education teacher's words from 5 years prior rang in my head to lean down and look through the space at the bottom of the hood. I pulled over and used some wire I found in the trunk to keep the hood closed. Anytime you close your hood, make sure it latches securely by pulling on the hood like you're trying to lift the front of the car off the ground. My friend and I just spent a few days at the beach shack. My friend got her P plates and she was super excited, so she wanted to drive us home. This was one of her first times driving alone. Being 17, we didn't really see an issue. I rang my dad beforehand and told him I was getting a lift. He said, "I don't think you should do that, I can come pick you up. I can drive some of the girls home too. I think you guys should just wait until she's had more experience." Of course, being 17 and thinking that I knew everything, I said it was fine and I was hopping into her car. We were on our way home, playing music and chatting, and there were 5 17-year-olds in this car. I was sitting behind the driver's seat. My friend pulls out onto a 2-1 expressway from a country road, like an intersection. We notice she's turned the wrong way and tell her to make a U-turn. She pulls to the side and decides to go for it through 2 lanes. She's pulled over and tried to make a U-turn so we could go in the right direction. She didn't check her mirrors properly, and a large truck was barreling down behind us. My friend got scared, put her foot on the brake in the middle of both lanes, and we were all screaming at her to keep driving. But she was frozen. I remember it was like slow motion. I looked at every single one of my friends. We all kind of shared a moment of fear, like, this is it, I guess. The exchanged looks haunt me, to be honest. We could hear the truck horn blaring at us. I looked out my window to the truck driving towards us. I locked eyes with the driver. Luckily, it stopped about 5 meters away from us. She pulled away and was really upset. The car was silent the entire way back. It was honestly the scariest moment. I'm from a really small town, and I think losing 5 people at once would really rock it. Seeing my friends' faces in that moment, it was actually horrific. I did have a moment of, okay, here comes the truck. It was oddly peaceful. After that day, I have a real understanding that I'm immortal and I can go at any minute. Oh, and to trust my dad. I went whitewater rafting on the Gowley River and my raft flipped on Pillow Rock, one of the most famous Class V rapids. Scariest moment of my life, but other than unexpectedly swallowing some water and almost chucking up, I came out completely unharmed. The narrator can't be alone in finding whitewater rafting to be an absolutely harrowing experience. For me, it was basically just like one long panic attack. Also, I'm willing to bet that Pillow Rock is not as comfortable a landing as it sounds like. I was coming home from a party at 2 a.m. in 2016 and made a conscious choice to drive through town rather than take the big highway that skirts the city limits. It would add about 10 minutes to the trip, but hey, it was the first time I'd been back in ages. That decision literally almost killed me. Not even 5 minutes after that, the 3-lane highway, really just a wide road, passed in front of a mall, and there was a signal light there. Well, some drunk idiot decided to turn right into the mall from the far left lane, and I was in the middle lane. I had absolutely no time to stop, so I slammed into the side of his car at 65 miles per hour. I remember yelling, "Crap!" and trying to keep control of the wheels to get the car off the road onto the grass, before I blacked out for a few minutes. The airbag and the seatbelt combined had fractured my sternum, which took the air out of my lungs and made me faint, I guess. But it didn't feel like I woke up, more so like my vision came back into focus and I was aware. But those few moments I was still kind of conscious and in immense pain. The worst I've ever felt in my life. I hurt from the skin on the soles of my feet to my scalp. Every single inch was on fire, and I was like, so I'm dead. This is my body telling me I'm dead. So when I came to, heat hit me because my car was messed and the engine was hot as standing in a fire. So I was convinced that my car was about to go up in flames. It didn't. I tried to get out, but the door was wedged shut from the crash, and I started to panic. I put my back against the passenger seat and kicked the door over and over until it opened and climbed out. Every single police officer, EMT, and even the tow truck guy took one look at my car and told me, "You shouldn't have walked away from that crash at all. The fact that all you have is a fracture and some lacerations is a miracle." So yeah, that's how I almost died and thought for sure I was dead, but got lucky. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My parachute deployed but failed to open. That was one of those moments. Then training kicked in. I cut away my failed chute, deployed my secondary, but for a brief moment life was about to be over in my mind. I was driving down a highway doing 65 miles per hour, and suddenly my car started to shake. I tapped the brakes in reflex and my entire car flipped 180 degrees. I was now facing oncoming traffic, including a semi-truck. I was so close I couldn't see the driver compartment. I screamed and jerked the wheel, bringing me out in front of a sedan, with two people screaming as they watched me appear out of nowhere. I kept screaming and floored the gas pedal. Made it to the side of the road and cried for a long time. I'd blown a rear tire. Hitting the brakes was a terrible, terrible choice. I was a senior in high school, and the student club I was in organized an unofficial beach trip towards the end of the year. No teachers or official permission, leaving me and a few other seniors in charge of supervising everything. After a couple of hours worth of fun, one of the other students came running up to me and said that 3 of the younger members of the club had been swept up by a riptide and couldn't get back towards shore. Me and 2 other older students, all experienced swimmers, immediately went to go and help them. My friends got 2 of the 3 kids in trouble and started guiding them parallel to the shore to get them out of the current. But the guy I went for was panicking, barely staying above water, and started dragging me down with him almost immediately. I yelled for people to get a lifeguard and tried to keep us both afloat, but after a few minutes, maybe 5, maybe 10, it felt like forever, I was getting exhausted and having trouble keeping both of us above water. I couldn't see anyone coming to the rescue. I started getting big mouthfuls of water, and my leg muscles were cramping up. I remember thinking, holy crap, I might actually die right here, right now, as the current started pulling us further and further away from where everyone was. Thankfully for everyone involved, one of the students on the beach had flagged down a couple of surfers who made their way out to where we were as quickly as they could and hauled first the youngest student and then me onto the front of their boards and took us back to shore. I'll always be thankful and appreciative of those strangers who put themselves in the dangerous position of rescuing 2 drowning swimmers. As several people have pointed out, it's not uncommon for people to die doing what I did, swimming into the water to rescue a drowning swimmer without training or equipment. There are a few techniques for rescuing drowning swimmers that everyone should learn if they're ever in the unfortunate situation of having to use them. I should have used them, but I was 17 and not thinking straight at the time, and I almost paid the price because of it. I was pregnant and got meningitis. At work, I fell ill, and they sent me home because apparently I looked grey. That night, my head felt like it was going to explode to the point that I started ramming my head against the wall to relieve it. My husband was terrified and wanted to call an ambulance, but I refused, thinking it was just a bad headache. Fast forward to things getting worse and to being taken to the hospital and them saying it's probably a migraine. I have migraines, and this was no migraine. A quick-witted nurse saw how confused I was. I couldn't remember my birthday or our son's birthday, or even how to sign my name. She took my temperature and did a urine test. As she's taking my temp, she goes, Whoa, have you taken your temp? It's 104. Suddenly, all of these alarms go off and I can't move. My body felt like I was locked up in a giant cramp, and I was having a fever-induced seizure, but I was conscious for the first part of it. I just saw a storm of doctors and nurses and equipment rushing into the assessment room. I thought, oh my god, my husband is going to get a call that I'm gone, or a vegetable, and my son won't have his mother, and this kid in me now won't know life. Then there was nothing. Lucky for me, they just covered me in ice to bring down my temperature, and that stopped the seizure. They took me to the ICU and sent me for an MRI, and all I remember is them telling me they may have to put me in a coma, and do I want my life to take priority over the life of the baby. Sitting in that ICU room in total isolation, they didn't know if it was bacterial or viral for a day or two, so no one could visit, I had a lot to think about and really had to come to terms with the fact that I might not make it out of this, and my baby might not either. You have to make your peace and stop fearing death and kind of get to work. I wrote letters to loved ones, thanks to a very brave and kind nurse's help. I'm happy to report it ended up being viral meningitis. I fought hard, and both myself and my now perfectly healthy 3-year-old son are doing great. I still have the letters in my safe and hope I never need them handed out. It was a long road to recovery, but I've never taken my health or life for granted again. I own a '65 classic Mustang which I enjoy driving anywhere it can go. I once took it up a large mountain with a group of friends. The roads weren't steep or especially dangerous, but there was danger present because of how high it was. We made it up the mountain with no issues and stopped at a bar at the top where my friends got plastered. I didn't drink because I was the designated driver. Before I continue, I need to clarify that the brakes on a stock classic Mustang from the 60s need to be primed before use. Basically, you have to hit the brakes twice before they work. On the trip down, the brakes cut out and stopped working. I primed the brakes over and over, but they didn't engage. The parking brake hadn't been working the past month and was going to be replaced that Monday. I soon lost control of the car and we started to barrel down the road. We turned a shallow right and saw a long road that ended with a sharp turn. At that moment, I thought I was going to die and take my friends with me. They had no clue, they were plastered in the back. Luckily, the brakes re-engaged halfway down the road and we managed to turn the corner. It's been 4 months and I haven't touched that car. To this day, my friends have no clue what almost happened. Hitting the brakes twice to engage them? What is this madness? I'm hoping that this is something that we've completely phased out by now. Also, go figure that a vast majority of people's near-death experiences are car-based, with a close following of people in water. A really bad flash fire at work where I jumped into a pit to get away from the heat. I saw the flames roll right over the top of the pit. I thought for sure I was going to die. I got some wicked 3rd-degree burns, but I lived. I was driving on the turnpike in my Mazda 3 in the hard rain. It was 3 lanes and I was in the left lane doing 55, and then I hit standing water and hydroplaned. I did a full 360 spin across all 3 lanes of traffic and ended up in the shoulder, stopped. I didn't hit anyone or anything, no one hit me, and one car was so scared with me that they also pulled over, but they didn't check on me. To this day, I'm still a bit scared in the rain. When I was about 16, I was mowing some lawns over the summer to make a little extra cash. One guy hired me to mow his lawn. He seemed nice enough, like a kindly old hippie who lived alone. I get to his house and he invites me in to give me some yard equipment. Once I step inside, he closes and locks the door behind me. He says, "Just locking the door to keep the bugs out." Wait, what? He leads me through his house and starts saying all of this weird stuff. I don't know what you've heard about me around the neighborhood, but none of it's true. I'm straight as an arrow. We get to his basement. I keep the mower in the basement. I probably should have hightailed it out of there, but as a polite teenager, I followed him down the stairs into said dark basement. Once I get down to the basement, my eyes adjust to the darkness. I start to get really scared. The entire basement has been plastered in 1970s Playboy undressed centerfolds, but they've all been chopped up, missing heads, missing limbs. That's when I turn around and see the guy emerging from the darkness, wielding a machete. That's when I was sure I was going to die. I just didn't know if he'd hack me up right then and there, or lock me in the basement and torture me for a few days. My fight or flight response was about to kick in, but then he hands me the machete and tells me to use it to cut back the kudzu. Huge relief. I mowed his lawn and cut back his kudzu, and the whole time I could see him watching me out the window. I finished as fast as I could and got the heck out of there. He called me a few times in the next weeks to mow his lawn again, but I never picked up. Eventually, he moved away. To this day, I'm not sure if he was an actual serial killer or just a kooky old man who didn't understand how creepy he really was. When I accidentally got dosed with something nasty at a party because I drank the drink of a female friend, I left for home on my own and fell from my bike 5 times and landed in the bushes next to the road. I threw up everything I had inside me and was so disoriented that I couldn't get up anymore. I slept through the night in the bushes while it was 13 degrees Celsius out and had multiple occasions where I thought I'd die. I called the emergency numbers multiple times, but they wouldn't come, and eventually I got picked up by a taxi chauffeur that brought me home after laying in the wet bush for 8 hours. I couldn't leave my bed for 3 days after that. The only thing I'm happy about in that experience is that the female friend didn't drink it and got home safely.
For the teachers out there, what are some stories about horrible parents you've had to deal with? I have a student who, while out on the playground, slapped another kid in the face. He was obviously taken into the office where the student then claimed that the wind blew his hand and that's what caused the slapping action. But it wasn't actually him. It was just the wind. It was a nice, sunny, mildly breezy day. Not at all possible. The student was in the office for physical aggression towards another student and looking at a 1-day in-school suspension. Clearly not his first offense. The principal calls home per the standard protocol in our district, and the parents believed his story, so much so that the parents actually came in with a lawyer to meet with the principal and to get all the charges dropped. Despite 2 noon aides and a kid with a nice red mark on his face, this student was sitting back in my classroom in the afternoon getting off completely for a blatant attack on another student. I feel like all he learned from this experience is that he can do whatever he wants, and his parents will let him get away with it to the best of their ability. These parents actually dragged their lawyer into the principal's office? Come on. A student of mine, 1st grade, came to school every day without a jacket, and when asked about it, he told me his jacket was too small and his family couldn't afford a bigger one. When winter came around, I raided the closet in the front office for a donated jacket for him. He lucked out, and there was a brand new jacket with matching hat and mittens in there, so I put them in a box I had laying around and tucked them into his backpack. They were a little big, so I hoped he'd grow into them. I told him there was a present for him in his backpack, but to wait until he got home to open it, as to not leave him vulnerable to questions and taunting from his classmates. The next day was warmer, so I wasn't shocked to see him without the coat. However, what was shocking was that his mother showed up at pickup in the family's SUV wearing that jacket. I had to have a talk with the poor guy and arrange for a recess jacket for him that he left in his cubby so his mom wouldn't take another one. You know, most decent parents would put their kids first and not steal the clothing off their back. My mom is a kindergarten teacher, and she had this one terrible student who not only kicked her in the face while she was helping him with his work, but he actually stole her digital camera from her desk drawer. She keeps it at work to take pictures of kids' projects and events and stuff to share with parents. His parents suggested that my mom shouldn't bend down to help students lest she be within kicking range, and to leave her valuables at home. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of stories like this where parents are just raising little monsters. I don't think I have any worst stories, but I mostly notice a lot of trends. Parents are starting to tell teachers not to bother them with details about their child's education. For example, little Johnny's failing. Why are you calling me about that? I also notice quite a large number of parents who don't try to discipline their children at all. I had a student who was doing poorly and was always falling asleep in class. I called the father to talk and notify him about the marks, and to suggest that maybe he needed more sleep. The father said, "What am I supposed to do about that?" It's actually quite a common statement. The parents that bothered me the most were the parents of a boy with special needs. Every day they sent him the same lunch, macaroni with nothing on it. I asked them at the first conference why they did this, and his mom said, "It's not like he'll notice." It was sad because he really did notice. When we had special lunch days, he would get so excited about hot dogs or pizza. It's indicative of how well they treated him overall, and they didn't try to engage or stimulate him. I was one of 4 teachers in a conference with Dee's mother and a school counselor. I was the last of the teachers to talk, but I said much the same as the other teachers. Dee skips class all the time, yells out constantly, never does his work, and regularly calls you over to ask questions before farting. Dee was awful. Who behaves like that in 10th grade? Anyway, after all 4 of the teachers said essentially the same thing, Dee's mom looked at the counselor and asked, "I don't understand why all these teachers are lying about my son." Dee's 2 older brothers were in jail. I assume Dee followed in their footsteps. Sounds like this lady's just clueless. Not from a classroom, but I had this one parent of a kid in my Girl Guide unit who was just awful. When we first met her kid, she would always ask questions about everything, didn't listen to instructions, and would then ask questions about everything she missed, and was generally clueless. Then we met her mother, and it all made sense. The first time we met her, she tried to sell us life insurance. That was her job. And in the first 5 minutes of talking to her, she started about 4 topics, yet never finished any of them. She drove around in an uninsured car, the irony, and would often offer to pick up or drop off other people's kids as well. She was also always late for everything. Last to drop off, last to pick up. Here's where the story gets even worse. I guess she used to homeschool her kids, which is scary to think about. In grade 1, she put her kid in public school. Every time she had a problem with the school her kid attended, she pulled her kid from the school and moved her to another school. It got to the point where the kid had gone to 4 different schools in less than a year. Her learning was severely behind, and it was hard for her to make and keep friends. I feel so sorry for whatever poor teachers had to deal with this mom. I was a humanities teacher briefly, and I had a meeting with the mother of a boy due to his ongoing behavior problems in class. Bright kid, very creative, just couldn't stop distracting some of his classmates. No biggie, really. Mom brought our meeting to a premature end by announcing, "Readings for homosexuals," and storming out of the room, yanking her kid along behind her. Poor kid never had a chance. Not a teacher, technically, I'm a juvenile counselor. But on Monday, I saw a kid who was brought in by her aunt and uncle. Dad was in jail and mom was a junkie. I kept trying to help them come up with rewards for good behavior, like trips to the zoo, family picnic, an hour of outside playtime with the kid, and they just kept saying how no one likes her and how she hates everything. Worst was, when I was asking the kid what happens when you steal, that was her crime, she said, "You get abandoned." Ugh, that one will hit you right in the gut, won't it? One of my best friends is a French teacher who came from France and became an American citizen. He's white and after living here for about 5 years, got a job in a majority black school. After he taught there for a few months, a mom decided to play the race card, came storming into his classroom and said her daughter said he was the biggest racist she'd ever seen, then threatened to get him fired. He let her rant and rave in front of the class, and when she finally paused for a breath, he turned around his wedding picture. He's married to a black woman. He said her mouth dropped open, but no sound came out, and she kinda slunk out of the classroom. His kids were crying, they were laughing so hard. My mom is a special ed teacher. She had a parent-teacher meeting with the parents of a severely disturbed young man with multiple problems. During the conference, the mother casually asked, "I'm not really sure, but do you think that maybe the reason my son has so many problems is because I smoked meth every day while I was pregnant with him?" The whole room was in stunned silence for about 30 seconds before my mom piped up with, yes. I agree. That's probably the reason. Most laughable experience I've had was with a plagiarism case. Kid had ripped his entire essay off the internet. I'd googled a few sentences from his assignment and found the page where he got the stuff from and printed it out so the kid could see that the 2 copies were word for word. He aggressively denied it, so we got his mom in for an interview. I showed her the submitted assignment and the webpage printout, and her answer was that her dopey 15-year-old boy had actually written the Wikipedia entry on the Treaty of Versailles, so it wasn't plagiarism at all. Nothing like supportive parents. I teach at a dance studio, and last week some of my 2-year-olds just kept biting their arms for unknown reasons. When class was over, I let the moms know, and one of them looked at me and went, "She would never!" My mouth kind of dropped as I tried to gather words, and she quickly said, "No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to see what it would be like to be one of those parents for a second." She scared the crap out of me for a minute there. If I become a parent, I'm gonna do this at least once. I've had my fair share of parental horror stories, as it seems most of us teachers have had, but I think it's time for a pick-me-up. I teach digital arts and technology at an inner-city public high school in a gang-infested, poverty-ridden, but culturally bright neighborhood. Last year, a student of mine, let's call him A, stole a MacBook laptop out of my classroom. After scouring video footage in detail, I identified the student who took it. The kid lied repeatedly to me about not taking it, and security couldn't find it on him or anywhere anywhere else at all. After escaping security, A picked up the laptop from another student, who he planted the laptop on earlier in the day, took it home, painstakingly cleaned the white keyboard and casing with a Q-tip, then promptly sold it to some dudes on the street for $500 cash. 2 days later, a random girl tells me about how A planted the laptop on the random kid. The accomplice admits, security calls A back in and gets his father into the school. Dad is furious with A. He takes A into their car and makes A drive through the streets of the hood to find the dudes he sold the laptop to. Dad forces A to buy the laptop back from the guys he sold it to for a markup price of $600, which A paid. The next morning, Dad makes A return the laptop back to my classroom in better condition than when he stole it. Not one file missing and sparkling white MacBook. There's hope for us yet. We had to squeeze in at least one good parent, right? My stepfather was having parent-teacher conferences and he was talking to this kid's parents. The parents had a question about when my stepfather was going to go over the Civil War. My stepfather said it would be in about a week or so. The parent said, "Great, because we'll pull our kid from the unit. We believe the Civil War never happened and we're under the Confederate government." My stepfather was flabbergasted and didn't know how to respond. Then the parents got up and said to him, "We'll also pull our kid for the World War II unit because the Holocaust was made up and never happened." Some people just love to believe what they want to believe, don't they? I could list all the terrible phone calls, conferences, and emails where parents blame everything except their child's actions for the reason they're in trouble. They're so numerous I can't even begin to count them. The one that's different than all of those, and the only one like it that I've encountered, was one with one of my AP English students. It was a typical parent-teacher conference. AP parents were flying in and out, since almost all the kids are doing well. This one super sweet girl and her mother come in and sit down. I tell them she is a 99% in the class. 99% total, as in an A+. Without missing a beat, the mom looks at her daughter with big time attitude and says, "What can we do to get that to 100? My mouth dropped. I said, "Well, we still have a semester, so there's time for extra credit." And then I made a mistake of adding, "But you know a 99 is really great." That was a mistake. The mom jumps out of her chair and starts yelling at me that I should mind my own business, and that she has high expectations of her daughter to become more than just a high school teacher. I hate parents, which is why I don't plan on ever becoming one. This mom needs a reality check. Her daughter's doing great. You have no need to be so hard on her. No worse story, but after 25 plus years in the classroom, I can tell you that awful kids generally have truly messed up parents. It's pretty shocking, really. Frequently horrible, in fact. We've had teachers physically attacked during parent conferences in our nice little town in the heart of America, and the parents get a slap on the wrist. I like teaching and have had a rewarding career, but I would not do it again. I don't want my kid to become a teacher either. That really says a lot, doesn't it? A story from my friend who's a high school teacher. A student turned in an exam with suspiciously similar solutions to a person near them. From past performance and the seating arrangement, it was clear which one of them was copying. My friend had some of the other teachers look through the exams to see if they would notice the same thing, which they all did. The student's mother came in and said that the teacher just didn't like her daughter and was just accusing her of cheating for that reason. When the principal said that several other teachers agreed with the assessment that her daughter had cheated, the mother said, "Well, then the teacher put her next to a good student to force her to cheat so she would get in trouble." I'm sorry, what? Is this lady delusional? My mother is a teacher. This is only the worst one. There are more. She was teaching a class in elementary school that had a severely mentally handicapped girl in it. I'm talking constant drooling, unable to form words, just grunts and moans and yells. She clearly belonged in special ed, but her parents refused. They insisted she be put in a normal class because she doesn't need special ed. The classes were completely useless for her, and her noise and mess seriously disrupted the education of 30 other students. The school even had to pay an aide to be with her all day because she couldn't take care of herself. When the school finally decided to go ahead and put her in special ed, the parents sued the district because apparently their 12-year-old with the mentality of a 3 to 4-year-old did not belong in special ed in their minds. Teachers had to spend their days in court instead of their classrooms, and my mom had to deal with lawyers and parents telling her she had no idea what was best for their kid. The only winners in this scenario are the lawyers. My dad is a principal and once suspended a girl for wearing a shirt that showed her whole stomach and then refused to put on another shirt to cover herself up. This was not her first or her worst offense, and he was fed up. The parents came in to discuss the situation. The dad didn't want to believe his daughter should be suspended, so he attempted to lunge at my dad and fight him. He called him all kinds of names and said he was going to mess him up. I can't remember, but I think the dad ended up getting arrested. My story isn't so bad, but I once worked with a parent who was really racist and tried to build a completely ridiculous case about why her son couldn't work with our black instructors. She wouldn't even look at them. Other than that, I'm constantly dealing with parents who are completely in denial about their children's abilities and have insane expectations, which is pretty horrible. All parents want their kids to be amazing and be the best, but let's be honest, not all of them have that potential. My wife is an experienced teacher. We live in a fairly rural northern area, and the school she just left is in one of the poorer towns. Typical bad was going an entire year without ever seeing a kid's parents or getting any response to correspondence. Also typical was kids without coats, hats, or gloves. She collected from our friends and left extras out in class. She had her personal property stolen all the time. Worse, kids dealing in the 7th and 8th grade, girls cutting and drinking and things like that, to dealing with assault trauma, girls pregnant, boys with fractured skulls, lost eyes, and fights with older boys and adults. Worst was a stretch of 7 years in which every year she had at least one of the following: kid's parent murdered, kid murdered, one time 2 in 1 year, kid's parent murdered the other parent, kid's parent took their own life, or kid's parent murdered another parent then took their own life. I finally convinced her she's paid her dues and she needed to take a break for her own sanity, making $20K less now at an alternative school, but doesn't cry every day. That's gotta be a heartbreaking situation to have to deal with every day for years. I can't begin to imagine. I had a student whose mother had divorced his father and both had remarried. He lived with his mom and stepdad, and his biological dad wasn't in his life. Just before his freshman year of high school, this was the year I had him, his biological father allegedly assaulted his stepdaughter and was facing possible jail time. For reasons that are a complete mystery to me, my student's mom started giving all the money she could to the father to help pay for legal expenses. I have no clue why she would do this, and especially why the stepdad would agree to it. My student had no winter coat and received nothing for Christmas because they couldn't afford it. All the money went to his deadbeat dad instead of him and his siblings, and he had a 5-year-old sister with special needs. The saddest part, he told me he was sure his father was guilty. Why would you take away money from a child who has all kinds of potential to give it to a scumbag who's just going to be going to prison? We had an over-attentive and incredibly enthusiastic parent of a 4-year-old girl that suffered from shaken baby syndrome. The child was very emotionally stunted, couldn't walk, and could barely speak. It was really sad, and she wasn't making much progress. Whenever we would get time to talk to her mother about her daughter's care, she would immediately change the direction of the conversation to be about herself. There also were several stories floating around in regard to how her child got this way. Absolutely none of them made sense and were constantly changing. Without giving away a lot of personal information, over time it became pretty obvious that super special ed mom had some kind of Munchausen by proxy. But we had no proof, and just had to watch the little girl for any other signs of abuse, such as incorrect medications, cuts, or bruises, and if found, report it to a nurse and guidance counselor that would alert CPS. I left a few months after this drama and never heard any follow-up about it. My first and only year teaching 8th grade was a doozy. I was 21, and all my energy and excitement about teaching was quickly zapped by parents dead set on proving me incapable of doing my job. I had parents sending graded papers back to me with my comments corrected and challenged. One day, I was called into the headmaster's office to discuss my use of foul language in the classroom after a parent learned I had told a kid to stop dorking around. The worst by far was a mother who somehow got my cell number and just constantly harassed me at the end of the year, all because she wanted her child to get a wholly undeserved A. This mother had a reputation, but I was in no way prepared for her full-out abuse. When her daughter, whom I'd repeatedly suggested receive some kind of outside academic assistance, ended up with a generous B- in the class, she just lost it. I was visiting my sick grandmother when she started texting me, demanding to see the final exams. Being as they were final exams, I was not intending to return them to the students. However, this woman had the headmaster so wrapped up in her crazy that he called me and requested that I have my landlord open my house door so someone could go grab the exams while I was out of town. This is on top of the mom's text messages like, "You'll never work again," and "Those tests are mine. I paid for them. I want what I deserve." At what point does this kind of thing become harassment? I had a student who dressed in the goth fashion, black pants and metal band t-shirt, long hair and polished nails. He was bullied relentlessly by boys, girls, and even other teachers. Every day I'd try to fend off the verbal abuse, knowing my classroom was the only 45-minute reprieve he would get. Soon he joined science club just so he'd have a pass to eat in my room at lunch instead of the cafeteria. He was a really smart kid. He easily aced the tests and helped along the other students with labs. I saw him building friendships in class. Then he started skipping school. He started missing my class and falling behind. When he came back after close to 2 weeks, he was even more withdrawn. He came to class and he turned in all the work he'd missed. He checked my website, but skipped out on science club. After a few days of this pattern and him refusing to talk to me, I called home. My intent was to tell his parents how worried I was for him. My worry was he might hurt himself. I said, "Hello, I'm calling about your son blank. I'm his biology teacher." Before I could go any further, his mom says, "I don't need to hear it. I'm pulling him out of school tomorrow. He's his own problem now." She hung up on me and I cried. I talked to my principal and student counselor and they promised they'd look into it, but he was withdrawn from school that week. He's still in my mind 5 years later. I'll always wonder what happened because I was a little goth kid once too. That's great that you reached out to this kid that you saw was having problems. You probably really did something great for them. Sometimes it's a shame the parents have as much control as they do. What's your, "Oh, so that's what it was for" moment that took you too long to find out? Those little green swords at Starbucks. I had no clue what they were used for until I was complaining one day that my coffee gets all over the lid when I walk. My friend grabbed one and stuck it in the top of the lid and asked why I didn't use a stopper. A stopper! Oh my god, my life has just changed. I just learned something too. Of course, I don't drink coffee, but anyway. I'm sure we're going to be learning a lot of things this video. Not me, but my dad. He always likes to look nice and put together. One day before church, I was maybe 14, I asked him if he had a lint roller. He got it for me and it was absolutely covered in lint. So I ripped off the top sheet. My dad's eyes widened in shock. "I always thought lint rollers were so expensive for how few times you could use them." He never knew there were more sheets underneath. Dad was in his mid-50s then. He hates when I tell that story. When I realized that the division sign is an empty fraction. Dude, you just blew my mind. That the approximately correct amount of loose leaf tea for 1 cup is a teaspoonful. That one makes sense. Not sure if this is a feature on all smoke detectors, but finally after 5 years of owning my house and getting used to grabbing a chair and knocking the batteries out of it, I just hit the test button on the front when it went off while cooking. Hush mode activated. It turns it off for 15 minutes and automatically turns itself back on. It felt like unlocking a secret character in Mortal Kombat. For years, I've had this electrical outlet on my back porch that's really intermittent. The thing works about half the time, then stops working for a couple weeks. Really frustrating. About 6 years after I bought the house, I also figured out what that one switch in the living room does. You know the plastic hooks on vacuum cleaners that are used to wind the cord around? Well, the top hook will spin 180 degrees to release the cord, so you don't have to spend time unwinding. I didn't realize this till my wife showed me well into my 30s. It took me 4 years of owning a car to realize I could spray washer fluid onto the rear windshield. I just assumed it only sprayed the front, and I would occasionally throw a bucket of water on the back if I needed to. Then one day, I just noticed an odd symbol on a lever I hadn't seen before. Held that mother down for about 10 seconds before a massive gush of liquid burst out of the back and changed my life for the better. I feel like that last sentence out of context could really go the wrong way for you. Clapperboards in movies. They're used as a visual reference to sync the audio and the video together in editing. Have you guys seen those escalators with the green lights shining through the steps? When I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I asked my dad what those lights were for. He told me they were for the blind. A few years ago maybe, when I was about 23 or 24, I got on one of those escalators with lights again with a friend of mine. I wanted to tell my friend this little fact that my dad had told me years ago about the lights in escalators. But as soon as I wanted to explain, I realized my dad was trolling me the whole time. It took me just under 20 years to realize it. I think we all have that one thing that we were told as a kid that took us way too long to realize wasn't true. I was a housekeeper for someone years back when I was in college. Side job, extra money. I would see short straws in random places at the house where I worked. I usually just picked them up and threw it in the trash can. It took me 2 years to realize the person I worked for had a drug addiction and he was using the straws to snort. Now I look back and I'm glad I wore gloves to clean other people's houses. I bought a used pickup truck in the late 90s that had an electronic key fob like any car does these days. It had a couple other buttons as well that, when pressed, seemed to do nothing. I asked them about it at the dealership and they told me it was probably for a remote start that wasn't hooked up. After 2 years of driving that truck around in cold Chicago winters, I sold the truck to my brother when I bought my first new car. One day, while talking to him, he started the car up with the remote starter. I stared in complete shock as he explained that you have to hold the button down. It's always a humbling moment when someone knows how to use something that was yours better than you do. I had no idea that salad spinners were to dry your salad. I thought they were to mix your salad dressing or something. We got one as a wedding gift. So I loaded one up, dumped some dressing in, and it spun a ton of the dressing off the salad. This made me think that the product was to apply dressing flavor to all of your salad bits without dealing with all the extra calories that come from overloading on the dressing. So naturally, I thought it was a total waste of time and money and tossed it into a cabinet to never be used again. A year goes by and I see a comment on Reddit about how salad spinners are such a game changer and so worth it. And I thought people were just crazy. Nope, I'm the idiot here. They're to dry your washed salad bits so you have nice, crisp, non-soggy salad. I had no idea, and the box sure as heck didn't tell me that. I worked with a guy on a construction site and it took him 7 months to realize that the porta potties had urinals in them. He thought that the bowl was in there for a sink that they put in the nicer ones. Just today at the gym, I forgot my shower sandals and I was like, oh sweet, they have disposable slippers just in case of such an event. I put them on and walked through the change room, used them, they worked well, until I realized that they were shower caps. I mean, you can use them for that. After high school, I was working a temp job in a business remodel. The wood floors had been put in and the contractor had a big roll of paper that he taped down to cover the floor to prevent scuffs and scrapes while the work continued. One time I touched the roll of paper and noted that it was somewhat sturdier than normal paper, and reminded me of the craft paper that we used in elementary school. Then I remembered that as a child, the teacher always called it construction paper. The bagel button on toasters only toasts one side of the bagels or bread or buns. When I was a kid, I had a large toy box with a lid. I had to use my head to prop up the lid when I grabbed things. There was a place to put a stick to prop it open. I noticed that there was a stick kept in the kitchen for me and my brother's spankings. By the time I realized the stick was originally meant for the toy box, I had outgrown the toy box. Your parents were essentially beating you with your toys? That's kinda messed up. The wiggly metal bracket on the end of a tape measure is like that on purpose. The amount it wiggles matches its thickness, so you can take inside measurements and push it in, or outside measurements and pull it out, and you'll get consistent measurements. I lived in the US for a year, and I was really annoyed about our light switches. They didn't lead to any lamps. There were no lamps in the ceiling at all, and I couldn't figure out why we had switches on the wall. I was also super annoyed that a few sockets worked sometimes, but not all the time. I never talked to our landlord because frankly, he scared me. And since I was moving back soon, I just figured I'd live with it. Fast forward 11 months when I visited a friend's house. I couldn't turn on her big floor lamp. Just do it like this, she said, and flipped the light switch on the wall. It turns out in America, light switches can lead to sockets in the wall. I can see how that would be incredibly frustrating to someone who's not used to it. For years, I thought those weird storage pod thingies some cars and vans have on the top of the roof were mini canoes. As in, I kinda thought that until I was like 24, but was too nervous to ask anyone. Since as long as I can remember, my mom has kept this creepy doll hung up on our wall in our garage, right next to the door to go into the house. The thing's a real eyesore, clothes are ugly, and it's just this raggedy thing. So recently, I asked my mom why the heck she keeps this ugly demon doll hung up on the wall, and she says, "Really? It holds plastic bags." She walks up to it and pulls a plastic grocery bag out of its butt. 19 years in that house, and I always thought my mom just had some weird taste in decoration. To be fair, you could use anything as a plastic bag dispenser. It doesn't need to be this creepy doll. I think your mom's taste is still a little off. That I did not need to put eggs in the refrigerator egg holder one by one. That instead, I could put it on top of the eggs in the case and simply flip it over. Well, yeah, but then all your eggs are upside down. That dryer sheets prevent static cling. I always assumed you put them in to make your clothes smell better. So when I moved out, I just never bought any. Then one day I had to do laundry at my mom's house. In the middle of switching the laundry, I'm complaining about the socks all stuck to the blanket. And my mom says, "Well, put in a dryer sheet, dummy." Oh, so that's what those are for. Those travel toothbrushes. I always carried one on me and always wondered why they made them so tiny. Until one day on vacation with my girlfriend, I'm using it and she says, "Why don't you use it normally?" Then she grabs the casing for the toothbrush and attaches it to the bottom of the brush. Mind blown. I always wondered why there was a G in the stylized Disney logo, and it honestly took me like 15 years to figure out it was a D the whole time and I was just an idiot. So I was a first-year medical student and was late to class and ran in sweating through my Oxford shirt and khakis. The lecturer was some esteemed local windbag cardiologist. As I sat down, he stated very grandly, "The most important part of the stethoscope is the part between the earpieces." I took my stethoscope out and started looking at the little spring thing that connected the two earpieces together, trying to figure out why that little cheap part was so important. After way longer than it should have, it occurred to me that he was talking about the doctor's brain, and dropped my stethoscope like it was hot and hoped no one saw me examining the little spring thing. Condensed soup. I always wondered why the cans were smaller yet tasted super salty and were thick. I never took the time to read the instructions about how you're supposed to add water. I went 39 years without knowing. One day, I finally asked my wife, and after she stopped laughing, she explained it to me. Growing up, my mother raised me to never look in her purse because it was rude to rifle through other people's belongings. At 7 years old, I felt like a rebel and looked through her purse while she was out gardening. I found her lipstick, wallet, and an odd-shaped canister that looked like perfume. I figured, let's give it a shot, and sprayed some all over me, mostly my face. What I didn't realize was that it was pepper spray. I ran around screaming in utter pain. Lesson learned. I mean, she tried to warn ya. When I was a kid, my grandfather and I built a model of the 1989 Batmobile together. We worked so hard to get it together. With neither of us having built models before, it took hours. We finished up and we had one green piece left. We looked through the instructions and looked all over the model. Could not figure it out. Finally, I went and got my grandma to see if she could figure it out. She came in, took one look, and it was the top of the superglue. We had forgotten to recap the superglue. "You must never forget about the piece of resistance." Took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that movie is referring to a moving picture. It's an old-fashioned term, similar to talkie. The metal square thing on a stapler can be turned around so the prongs of the staple go outwards instead of inwards. It's a lot better for temporary staples, much easier to undo. I was at an antenatal class with my wife when the instructor shared a tip for making sure you let your baby feed from each breast an equal amount, by taking it in turns left and right which one you start off with. How do you remember which one you started with? You use a hair tie. A few minutes later, she remarked, "And don't forget to put the hair tie on your other wrist when you next do a feed." To which I remarked, rather too audibly for a room of 20 strangers, "Oh, you put it on your wrist." Oops, I was a bit slow that day, and many other days. For a split second while reading this, I thought the same thing. That the pockets on suit coats and blazers and back pockets of slacks are loosely stitched closed and meant to be cut open. I spent 4 years of my life as a ticked-off pragmatist. Why the heck would you put pockets just for show? Those jerks. One day, a friend heard my incessant complaining and goes, "You just make a small snip and pull the thread out, then the pockets are accessible." I go to the closet and snip open one of the pockets. Well, don't I feel stupid? I had just bought my first house and needed to patch a hole in the bathroom fan exhaust duct in the attic. I was walking around Lowe's thinking, I wonder what sort of tape I should use for ducks. Then it hit me. Duct tape for ducks. Thank you, my friend. I never put that together. Potato peelers have a little indentation on the end of them. It's used to scoop out the black parts of potatoes that you don't want to eat. My mind alternates in this thread from, I didn't know that and it's really cool, to how the heck did someone not know that? Pipe cleaners. When I was a kid, they were used for crafts and stuff, and I just figured that they were used to clean like kitchen pipes. In my kid brain, that kinda made sense. As I grew up, I just never really thought about it again. Then one day in college, I decide cigars are expensive and pipe tobacco seems much cheaper overall. Plus, the rustic feel of a man on his porch reading with a tobacco pipe always appealed to me for some reason. So I went out and bought a cheap tobacco pipe, and while I was checking out, the cashier asked me if I wanted pipe cleaners. The scales just dropped from my eyes. It took 20 plus years to learn that pipe cleaners were used to clean, pipes. I've been driving my Chevy Silverado for 9 years before I realized I could lower the seat height. It had been at max elevation the entire time. First time in the past decade I've been able to see the sky out of my windshield while driving. Q-tips. I'm British. We don't call them Q-tips, and I didn't know what they were until I was in my mid-20s and saw a meme with a photo of a Q-tip. I was genuinely shocked. People never actually use them in books or films. They just say stuff like, "I think you need a Q-tip," if someone misunderstands something. I thought it was like saying, "Get a clue," and I'd always just assumed Q-tips were a reference to some kind of American game show. This one's just a cultural difference and a very easy mistake to make. Don't worry, we understand. In the song I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, it's Daddy dressed up as Santa Claus. I didn't realize this until my late 30s. Yeah, the song takes on a whole new meaning when you realize Mom and Dad are just doing a little role play. Grapes on the front of raisin packages. My girlfriend told me last year that raisin and grapes are the same thing, and I laughed it off because that's nonsense. Then I saw a big grape on my raisin box. Yes, and I'm 33 years old. I never got the euphemism of Blink-182's album, "Take off your pants and jacket." I just thought it was a dude getting ready for bed or something, not taking off your pants and jacking it. That makes total sense considering the band. My boyfriend was around 21 when I had to explain this to him, but he asked me to have dinner at his parents' house and I asked what we were having, and he said roast beast, and I laughed at him making a Grinch joke, and then he asked me what I was talking about. I mentioned that he called roast beef roast beast, and that the Grinch reference was funny. And I realized he seriously had no idea what I was talking about. So I had to reveal to my boyfriend that roast beast is not an actual thing. It's called roast beef, and roast beast was strictly a Dr. Seuss reference. He was a little embarrassed, but it was really actually so adorable. I have a similar one to this in that I called it grilled cheese for the longest time instead of grilled cheese. It's just the way my ear heard it for some reason. I know it doesn't make sense. I learned at 27 how to properly clean a toaster. I didn't know there was a trap door at the bottom of it. I showed an Ivy League friend of mine and their mind was blown. We all have gaps in knowledge sometimes, and sometimes they overlap with your friend. The fact that pineapples don't grow on trees. They're just plants. I didn't know this until I was hanging out with my friend and we were swimming in her pool. I got out and pointed to what looked to me to be a weird spiky looking plant, and she looked at me completely dumbfounded. She just looked at me and said in a disappointed voice, "That's a pineapple." I felt like my whole life at this point was just a lie. For the longest time, I genuinely thought pineapples grew on trees. That the reason baby vests have envelope shoulders is so that when they do a poop that explodes all over the vest, you can remove the vest downwards instead of lifting it over their head and smearing poop all over their face. When you first walk into a Home Depot, there's always a stack of orange buckets by the entrance. And for the longest time, I thought they were Home Depot's equivalent of a shopping basket. I'd haul that thing around just throwing screws and hardware into it and then just put it next to the cash register when I was done. They'd always ask if I wanted the bucket too, and I just thought it was a clever way of selling more buckets. Only about a month ago did I realize they're just buckets, and everyone at Home Depot just thought I was mentally imbalanced. Hey, you know what? You're making use of it. I'm not going to fault you on that one. When I finally figured out why Dad's special cigarettes smelled so different from regular cigarettes, then his room full of blacklights, incense, psychedelic art, and old-fashioned pipes made a lot of sense. I got my driver's license while only using the clutch pedal for driving in reverse. I didn't even know you had to use your accelerator until my girlfriend pointed it out after having my license for over a year. I would think the instructor would have caught that one, but I guess that's on them, not you. When I was little, I was fascinated by TV guides. I thought shows on television were just aired totally at random. I used to stare at the TV guides and whisper, "How do they know?" The image of this one is just kinda cute. As a toddler, I always loved it in church when we'd sing about some bear named Gladly, and who happened to be cross-eyed. Every time it painted a cute picture in my child mind. A cuddly teddy bear with crossed eyes and a sweet smile. I'll never forget the disappointment of learning to read and opening the hymn book for the first time to Gladly the Cross-Eyed Bear. I had to explain to a friend of mine who was 19 at the time that large people were obese, not a beast. I have earbud headphones, and where the cord splits, there was this slider thing. The whole time I thought it was something to adjust the length or something. Then I found myself untangling my headphones, and I said to myself, if these two ends didn't split up, things wouldn't be so bad. Then it hit me. That sliding thing was there to keep the ends together and stop it from getting tangled. Some people also use it to just tighten it up to your chin if you're going to be moving around and working out or something, but that's one way to use it too, I guess. Not me, but my brother. He would have been around 15 at the time. We were at an amusement park in line for lunch. My mother turns to him and asks what he wants. He pauses for a sec, then says, "I want a cheeseburger, but with no cheese." At this point, I do what any older brother does and start to laugh a little bit and ask him the question again. Same response. At this point, he knows he's doing something stupid. So I ask him, "You mean a hamburger, right?" He says, "I don't want ham." You know, I can see how that could be misleading though. Parents of Reddit, what's the most absurd thing you found on your kid's social media? Not technically a parent, but an older sister. My little brother, when he was around 7-ish, had a search history of naked women and such. And when my mother found out and confronted him, he cried and was saying he just wanted to be like Jack from the Titanic by drawing naked women. And he had a few pages of his attempted drawings. Hey, maybe the kid's found his calling in art. We don't know. Was at my friend's place at around the age of 10 to 12 when my parent called me home randomly. I run in the front door and both my parents are sitting in the living room and immediately ask me to spell the word sex. I do, and then they tell me to send my brother over. My brother runs over and he'd be around 9 or 10 and doesn't come back. Turns out he searched for girls having sex but spelt it 6. These parents are over here trying to identify the digital handwriting. I found my stepdaughter's Musical.ly account. She had a bunch of poor attempts at sexy belly dancing to various Evanescence songs. She joined one of those Facebook groups. It was called Anything's an Adult Toy If You're Brave Enough. Pictures of my daughter, 11, posing quite harmlessly that went on to bum shots in short shorts. Someone pretending to be a 14-year-old girl asked her to do these shots for a modeling competition, and sent similar shots so she knew how to pose. She eventually stopped the conversation. The pics came through my iPad since the devices were linked. The police got involved and also CEOP. They originated from an account in South Africa, so Interpol took over the case and will probably never get an update. Instagram never even bothered to respond to my report. This happened to the 12-year-old daughter of a friend of mine recently. She also happened to cross it in much the same way and reported it to the police. They ended up having a huge investigation involved with the FBI, and the guy has now been sentenced to jail. My friend's daughter was one of the dozens he'd been soliciting. Keep an eye on your kids' social media, guys. You never know who's trying to contact them. I had a coworker bring her kid in during the summer so that she could run him to the local middle school for football practice when she took her break at 9. Since I was in training at the time, I was sitting with her at her desk and mine was not in use. To keep him occupied, I'd log into my computer and then she'd pull up YouTube so we could watch the Watch Me Whip song, because apparently kids will watch that for hours. Well, one day she goes over to check in on him and says in a confused voice, "Who the heck is Ed Gein?" So it turned out that it was still logged into my YouTube profile, where I had taken to watching documentaries about serial killers, and the kid had clicked on one of the recommended videos. Whoopsies. If she's really worried about what her kid's watching, then she should just create her own YouTube account. Personally, I have childlike parents. Weirdest thing so far was having to sit down and have a talk with my mother about how some things on Facebook are not real. My extended family lives in Houston, and during Hurricane Harvey, my mother was driving my elderly relatives to hysteria by emailing them horribly photoshopped pictures of Houston landmarks submerged under 50 feet of water, followed by, "It's a biblical flood! The world is ending! The news is lying to you! You're gonna die if you don't get in your car and drive out of town right now!" I talked to my stepdad and made him give me her password so I can shut down her account during the next natural disaster. Probably doing everyone in your family a favor. When I was 9 or 10, my buddy and I were on the family computer doing whatever 9 or 10-year-olds do. My friend told me to go to prettygirls.com. Seemed innocent enough, except it directed us to an adult site, and we immediately panicked and closed the browser. My mom really chewed us out when she found out. I tried to tell her we were just looking for pretty girls, but she wasn't having it. It was a long few weeks of computerless punishment. I don't know what it is, but I'm willing to bet it's something I disapprove of. My 15-year-old happily announces that he went viral because his comment amassed 1.5k likes on Reddit. "Well, what did you ask?" I asked him. "I forgot." "What's your Reddit name?" "I can't tell you." "Then why did you mention it?" With that comment having 3.5k likes itself, I'd like to think that the son saw it and got pretty jealous. That my 12-year-old son searched for pro study tips. No joke, my son, trying to study harder. Never in a million years and lives would I have expected this. When my twins were young, in elementary school, they were looking up The Simpsons and accidentally came across some adult Simpsons content. The computer was in the living room, so I heard them giggling and turned to see two guilty little faces. It was so hard not to laugh and so disturbing. What a conversation. The sight of Milhouse and Lisa is forever burned into my retinas. Looks like everything's coming up, Milhouse. When he was little, my brother once wanted to help us find a cool new purse to order for my mom's birthday. He did an image search for fun bags, and my parents had to answer a lot of questions. Not a parent, but my cousin one time got onto the computer when he was 11 or 12 or so and tried searching for indecent pictures of girls his own age. I was there when his stepdad checked through the browser history, and needless to say, he and my cousin had a chat about acceptable search terms. Yeah, that could have gotten really bad. They might be on a list now. Not social media, but I once caught both of my nieces playing an animated game online where the objective was to spank a cartoon butt with a paddle. Every time they'd swing the paddle at the butt, it would emit the sound of a woman moaning. They couldn't understand why the game was inappropriate, and were laughing hysterically while playing. Not a parent, but some of my students, 7th and 8th grade, asked to add me on Instagram. The worst username I've come across is BootyWarrior13. To be clear, I don't ever add anyone and my account is private. I never give them my handle because I don't want them to find me, but if they do, I decline the follow anyway. Usually the way I find out about their Instagram names is because they'll oftentimes want their peers to follow them, and they'll promote themselves by putting their username or handle on the board. I often joke though that I would add them on Facebook, to which I always get the reply, "Facebook is for old people," so that's fun. When I was 12, my dad found adult Dragon Ball Z content in my search history and proceeded to look through all of the pages while I hid in the bathroom pretending to take a poop. I remember him yelling my name and having to mentally prepare to deny everything. I'm scared to death to have kids and find their adult content searches. My girls are 8 and 10, and so far we've seen sucking boobies and Scooby-Doo sex. It's great. Parenting is great. Send help. Not my kid, but on Halloween I saw a post on my 17-year-old cousin's Snapchat that was a selfie caption verbatim, "Any girls trying to come over here and suck on this spooky thing and get festive with some pumpkin spice lattes?" I immediately facepalmed, then laughed my butt off for a solid 15 minutes. A friend from work's son goes to a fairly strict Catholic school. One day, I was walking out to my car and she was outside yelling on the phone and generally freaking out. I waited around. She usually has a lot of funny drama going on. She hangs up the phone, looks at me, starts hyperventilating, and then laughs hysterically. I was like, "Girl, what is going on?" She said her son's principal called her and her husband and that they need to come to the school immediately, that her son will fill her in on the rest. She continues to tell me that her son got caught looking at naked ladies on the internet, and the principal printed out his search history. He searched booby prawn and lady parts during class. She was yelling at her husband on the phone, telling him about the situation, and all he had to say was, "We should have taught him how to delete the history." I mean, the husband has the kid's best interests at heart, let's be honest here. When I was a little girl, I wanted to play some Barbie games or look at girl stuff, so I went to girls.com. Went downstairs to my mom crying in order to rat myself out. My little sister had something similar happen. She wanted to look at new bikes in order to decide what to ask Santa for. She went to dicks.com, hoping to see Dick's Sporting Goods. Instead, she saw a lot of schlong. Guess it runs in the family. Funny thing is, dicks.com actually takes you to Dick's Sporting Goods homepage now. Oh dear God. Reading this makes me realize how much my parents probably saw in my search history before I knew about incognito mode. Okay, it should be my parents telling this story, but here goes. So when I was a youngin' and just exploring the internet, I would usually go on Disney Channel to play games, but I wanted to find sites with fun girly stuff on them. So of course I just went to girls.com. Well, that took me right to an adult site, and my little self was like, "Whoops," and closed it right away. Well, apparently my dad had been looking at the browser history and noticed. So my dad's interrogating my two older brothers, asking them who was looking at adult content. And of course they said it wasn't them. My dad was persistent with trying to get them to confess until I come down the stairs and confessed that it was me. My brothers had the biggest sigh of relief. You're a good sister. I know many a sister who would have counted that as a double win. Number 1 for not getting caught, and number 2 for getting her brothers in trouble. I found out my son is an urban explorer. He's 14 and I saw some of the videos of him and his friends sneaking into an old Air Force base and climbing on top of an air hangar. Yeah, just make sure he doesn't do anything really dangerous. One of my buddies was an urban explorer and I honestly don't know how he's not dead. He's climbed the top of spherical shaped buildings, hopped on fast moving trains and other crazy stuff. This is another trend that I just find incredibly dangerous and stupid. Guys, please don't do stuff like this. It's not worth it just for some views. I was trying to figure out my niece's age, but it was too late to call my mom and ask. I remembered she had an Instagram account and I thought that might help me figure out how old she is. I looked her up. She has the standard tween Insta bio about what activities she likes and a list of 15 of her BFFs. Immediately followed by pondering, and I quote, "Mostly, why do people hate me?" She's 12. She's definitely 12. In my 9-year-old son's Google history, I found, "Do girls in England poo blood for a month? Do you live in England? Because it's weirder if you don't." My 15-year-old dropping acid on Snapchat. So, not just bad choices, but we're raising a kid stupid enough that not only created video evidence, which was beyond dumb, but to keep it under my story. I checked my 11-year-old son's search history to find a number of interesting questions. Do men grow vaginas? Will my penis disappear when I'm 18? Will I become a girl? How do I save my penis? I asked him about his search history a couple days later, and he told me that some kids in school told him that when boys turn 18, they turn into girls and lose their penis. Those bastards. I hopped on my nephew's tablet and proceeded to pull up the internet browser. Immediately, I was staring at a screenshot of an overweight, homeless-looking Santa knocking the cornhole out of a much younger Mrs. Claus. I immediately asked my nephew what kind of research he was doing with this Santa video, and his face turned fire engine red and he scurried back to his room. I'm sure he at least appreciates your discretion. This is kinda close. So I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. They both love to watch kids' YouTube. Mostly these annoying toy unwrapping videos. I don't know. Anyhow, the other day I was working on my computer and they were playing Play-Doh. My 2-year-old comes into the room and tells my wife, while I'm listening, "Mommy, I made this." My wife, "Oh, that's awesome." 2-year-old, "Do you like it? Let me know in the comments." My wife and I died. I think this might kind of say something about what we're exposing our kids to in this day and age, but we're not going to get into that right now. I recently discovered my 10-year-old son had been looking for inappropriate content, but his computer has parental controls, so he was trying to look it up on his Roblox game. My daughter was 6 at the time. She was supposed to be asleep, and I go up to charge her Kindle and can't find it. I go to her room and quietly sneak in. I find her watching a video under a blanket. It's a popular mechanics video about how to build your own windmill. She had a mock model in the corner of the room she was working on. I definitely wasn't expecting that. This is definitely our most wholesome one so far. She's just enthusiastic about her project. My kids are too young for Twitter or Snapchat, but they love to watch YouTube. I started getting notifications a few months ago from people replying to my comments on conspiracy videos. I found out my son has a curiosity about flat earthers and doomsday preppers. That's kind of the scary side of everything. The kid doesn't know any better, he's just watching a video. And once you watch one, YouTube just starts to recommend more and more. They don't understand that the videos they're watching are conspiracy videos, and that the information in them might be less than accurate. When my son was 8, my wife was looking at his tablet and saw his comments on YouTube videos. Quite a few comments along the lines of, "You don't know what you're talking about, you," and then a series of randomly strung together cuss words that normally wouldn't be used together. He'd get called out by others for the random cussing and he'd say, "I'm only 8, I can do what I want," followed by random string of cuss words. When we brought it up, he knew they were bad words, but was repeating other vulgar comments he saw from other comment trolls, and didn't fully understand the harshness of his words. Now his YouTube habits are monitored much more closely, and he hasn't done anything like that since. Hopefully you got on top of that one early enough that he's not going to turn into another kid telling me how he's going to screw my girlfriend on Fortnite. My daughters are grown up now, but when one of them was around 14 or 15, I opened up her MySpace page. She was telling all these kids that her mother, that would be me, was a raging alcoholic. She was telling them how I was neglectful and how I didn't like her. At the time, I was pregnant with twins, working full-time, and my husband was gone with the Marines a lot. I'm not a drinker at all. Obviously, we had a long talk. She was feeling left out with all the excitement over the babies. Still though, it was pretty hurtful. It took me a long time to get over that. I wouldn't take that one too personally. Your daughter was just looking for some attention. It's honestly kind of understandable. My younger brother thought that when you entered more searches, it would delete the ones before at some point. So I look on his iPad one day and see a search for boobs or something like that. The search after that was cheese, then cheese, and then cheese, and so on. So many cheeses. Wouldn't you have to start at the top where it was just a whole bunch of cheeses and then see it be less and less cheeses as you go down? So you'd be scrolling down through all of the cheeses and then get to the bottom and see boobs and be like, I see what he was trying to do. My significant other was looking something up on YouTube at her sister's place, and the search bar autofill defaulted to sexy girls with nipples you can see through their tops, but spelt horribly. My significant other's niece is 6. Needless to say, her parents were mortified and doubled down on the parental controls. When Twitter became popular, my son was about 5 or 6 years old. He came up with a way to tweet vocally. Throughout the day, he would say things like, "Going to play with my trains, tweet tweet," and "bacon for breakfast, tweet tweet." I was sad when he stopped doing it. When I was 11, my mom asked me one day about some Google searches on the family computer, including sexy Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. I blamed it on the babysitter and somehow convinced my brother to back me up. A couple years later, I was caught searching, "Can I see a picture of a girl in a bikini?" But I wasn't able to blame it on anyone this time around. I've since discovered the incognito tab. I think the incognito tab might be the secret hero behind this entire Reddit thread. My stepson is 7. I found a bunch of searches for Dominicans with no hands and feet, Dominicans with no heads, Dominican chests, Dominican torsos, Dominican legs, Dominicans in stores, Dominicans for sale, silver Dominicans, black Dominicans, white Dominicans. I was at a loss of how to bring it up to him. Thankfully, the next day we were in a clothing store and he asked me why Dominicans don't have hands or heads. Then why are there so many different colored Dominicans? I remembered the internet searches and became a little upset. I told him to be quiet because what he was saying could be taken offensively by Dominican people. He then got frustrated and loudly said, "Dominicans aren't people," as he pointed to a statue next to us. I breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Mannequins." I'm sure you still got a few looks in that store though. Not my kid, but my nephew. He was diligent upon receiving his phone to get Facebook installed along with an account. Last year, Halloween, I walked by him on his phone and glanced at a video of an explosion. Turns out, he liked a page of people blowing crap up. Not just any crap, but the actual crap that comes out of people. When confronted, he said he was shown the page from a friend who uploads videos there. You know, typically I would say your kid's gonna be friends with who he's gonna be friends with, but I think this is definitely one of those cases where you need to intervene. My son has autism, high functioning but still autistic. He's been mainstream for most of his schooling, and in 5th grade, one of the boys told the others how to search vagina and boobs on the computer. Well, my son in all of his autism glory was searching pugina, not vagina, and was only getting pictures of leaves. Poor kid. This was probably the early 2000s. Me and my buddy were off school for the summer and he would come hang out at my house. Occasionally, we'd look at adult content on the family computer. One day, my dad comes home from work and comes downstairs and says, "Hey, you guys missed the bus." I'm like, it's summer. There's no school. My dad responds, "The bang bus." Mother of God, we forgot to close the browser. I found a search for weight loss on my then 12-year-old search. Bothered the heck out of me as I've always tried to instill good body image, and she's by no means overweight. She was going through the baby fat stage. Started having conversations about the importance of being healthy and exercising, but to be comfortable with the body we have. She's since stretched out, but man, I looked for signs of starving and bulimia. Her mother was a bulimic, and I didn't want her to repeat that. We got my young daughter a tablet last Christmas. A couple days later, I went to look something up, and the search bar history had one entry. Is Santa Claus real? Well, that one kinda backfired, didn't it?
What's the worst experience you've had with a toilet? Not me, but a friend of mine. A group of us all decided to go on a camping trip with our respective significant others. His girlfriend tells him she will not go unless they have a toilet, so he goes out and buys a portable, chemical toilet. He also buys a new tent for them to use and retire the old tent to be the bathroom. He sets the toilet up in town on the valley floor, fills up the fill tank with the blue chemical fluid. He tests it to make sure it works properly. The operation is simple. You pull a lever which opens a flap in the bottom of the toilet. The evidence is dropped through the flap, and a second valve drops fluid down the sides of the toilet into the open flap, flushing all remaining evidence into the lower tank. The flap then returns to its original position, creating a nice, airtight seal, preventing the contents of lower tank from disturbing your precious sensibilities. We drove all the way up to the top of the mountain and set up camp. We have a fun day of eating camp food, drinking beer, and having fun. It's now probably close to midnight and pitch black. My friend is the first one to need to use the new bathroom with the new 20th century chemical toilet. He excuses himself and proceeds to thoroughly test the storage capacity of the upper bowl. He pushes the lever to open the flap to the lower sealed tank, and immediately he gets a lesson on air pressure displacement, as the 7,000 or so feet higher elevation has resulted in a much higher pressure inside the waste tank than the air outside. There also appears to be a slurry of liquid and solid waste between escaping air and victim. What we hear around the campfire is a loud thwomp, followed by the friends screaming, "Oh God! Oh God! Oh crap! No!" Of course, being the good friends we are, we rushed to his aid with him yelling, "Don't come in here! Don't come in here!" Many wet naps were used that night, a midnight creek river bath, and years of teasing came from that night. That was the last camping trip for that tent. It was retired. The toilet, however, still is used, but the reason for the little screw valve on the side was learned by all. In conclusion, pressure difference in camping toilet became crap fountain. I wonder if, on deliberation, his partner would have just preferred crapping in the woods like the other campers do. I've never used one of these devices, and now I'm not sure I ever would. Was at Target one day shopping for groceries and whatnot. I then got that feeling, when you've got to take a dump. I rushed to the nearest bathroom and unleashed the beast. Mind you, this Target only had one bathroom, and it was a bathroom where only one person could be there at a time. I thought it would be a quick crap, but it turned out I was wrong, and it would not stop coming out. This goes on for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I hear knocking on the door. It was a lady that said, "My son really has to use the bathroom. Would you please hurry up?" I couldn't really respond to her because of all the pain I was feeling, so I basically moaned and grunted at her. After about 3 minutes, I hear a kid screaming, "Mommy!" and I could probably tell it was the mother's son. Hearing this, I knew I needed to hurry up, so I forced myself to squeeze out the extremities faster. As soon as it's done, I whip fast as possible. The worst part is that when I tried to flush the toilet, it clogged. So about 3/4 of the toilet bowl is filled with crap, pee, and toilet paper. Scared, I wash my hands and make a run for the door, then to my car. When I exit the bathroom, I notice a little boy crying and his mum saying things like, "Frick, damn, crap," etc. Turns out the kid crapped himself because I was taking such a long time. It was awkward when I was walking back to my car since the woman's car was right next to mine and she was carrying him to the car so the kid could go home and change. In conclusion, made a kid crap himself after taking a humongous crap myself. Here you go, my worst toilet experience. I have issues. I'm painfully shy, very nervous of things a lot of the time, and I get highly anxious about some things, particularly going to the loo. I find it really awkward to go to the bathroom in an unfamiliar house, even more so with unfamiliar people. When I was at university, I was the only girl living in a house with a group of boys. I was quite nervous about crapping. I mean, males tend to have a kind of idea of females that they don't do crap or something, and that they think that when they do, it's pink and pebble-like. Anyhow, one evening I went to the toilet, didn't put the light on, and the pull cord for the light was outside the bathroom. So I made the decision on my way that I wouldn't use the light. It was early evening in autumn, so it was light-ish. I could see, but it was dim and shadowy. I only had to pee, so it wasn't a huge problem. Only it was a problem because then I ended up pooing. I was supposed to be going food shopping with one of my housemates, and here I was pooing. I was getting a little anxious that he was waiting downstairs, and the time I was taking would be a firm indicator that I was more than peeing. I quickly finished up and was about to leave the bathroom when I thought to myself that I should maybe double-check the toilet was clean before I left. Having no light meant it was very hard to see if there were any stains. I used my phone to light up the toilet and saw the biggest poo ever. Seriously, it was taking up half the toilet and was wedged into the U-bend. I panicked. I flushed, but it didn't move. Didn't budge. Now I was getting really flustered. Downstairs, housemates would have definitely heard a double flush. It still hadn't gone. I couldn't risk a third flush. A third flush would be far more humiliating than dealing with it using an alternate method. At least I thought so. Not sure how I convinced myself of that, but in blind panic and toilet embarrassment, I did. I convinced myself that I had no other option but to lift it out. I did not tell myself to wrap my hand in toilet paper. In went the hand. I got a firm grip on the log and Sue learned that there is no gripping a poo. It can't be done. It began to disintegrate in my hand. But I managed to sort of flip it into the sink where it landed in 2 chunks with a wet thud slap and left opaque brown stains all over the sink. Here I will add that I definitely should have just broken it up and flushed it, but I was panicking so bad. I could feel my heart pumping and I was sweating and my breathing was stalling. My whole body was shaking and felt like jelly. It was like a negative adrenaline. So what do you do when you have a sink covered in crap stains and 2 huge chunks of crap sat there waiting to be disposed of? You mash it down the sink. You run the tap until the water is scalding hot and you proceed to mash the poo into the plug hole as it disintegrates. Only it blocks the plug hole. Now the sink is filling up, and you have a crap plug in the bottom of the sink of burning water, and you have to unblock it. So you shove your hand in, burning yourself while you're trying like crazy to scoop the crap out of the little plug holes. All the while, you hear your housemate shouting up the stairs, "Hey, Susie, are you okay? Are you ready to go?" Oh crap, literally. Suddenly, the panic reaches a new level. The housemate is coming up the stairs, the door to your crap sauna is at the top of those very stairs, and you know that the steam in this room is the most foul-smelling steam that could ever be, and soon it will have leaked under the door to the top of the stairs he's walking up. You grab bleach, soap, shampoo, shower gel, and start squirting it under the hot tap, trying like hell to make normal-smelling steam. I'm in the shower. I thought I'd need a shower. It might save time. What the frick was that excuse? Anyhow, the steam is now pooey and perfumed and sickening. The poo is almost mashed away, but the last few bits are not leaving. If you've never manhandled crap, it has a texture like no other. It feels a bit like when you start kneading bread just after adding the warm water and it's warm and sticky. Maybe it's seeded bread. There's definitely a slight coarseness to crap. Mainly, it's the stickiness that is a hassle. And the smell. Obviously, it sticks like melted chocolate and dough combined into a sticky, thick nightmare. You force the last few nuggets down the sink and start trying to wash your hands. The smell will not leave. Will not budge. After 10 minutes of scrubbing and soaping and crying and sitting because your legs will no longer support you, you decide to do the walk of shame. Exit the bathroom, tell your housemate that you were sick in the shower and it took some cleaning up. Remember suddenly, thanks to Beethoven, that tomato juice gets rid of skunk smell and wonder if it will get rid of poo smell. Set off to the supermarket in new hope of getting rid of the smell. The biggest "oh crap" came in the toilet roll aisle when my housemate says, "Oh, this reminds me, I did the biggest crap ever earlier. It wouldn't flush, I just had to leave it." It wasn't even my own crap. I'd known this guy for 3 weeks and had already gotten up to my elbows in his crap, all because it felt weird pooing in an unfamiliar environment. That flatmate's gonna try and take a dump at least 3 times before he leaves the house from now on. Yep, this incident will scar her for life. He will constantly go to the bathroom before he does anything, really. Holy crap, I must have been that kid. I thought this would be a funny topic to do, and it very much is. However, it's also making me pause to gag intermittently, so a mixed bag in summary. A mixed bag of poo, pee, and my spew. Here's another one. I was pooping in a train toilet. I thought it was locked. My country's train toilets use electronical locks. You push a button and it's supposed to be locked. But it wasn't. Some young good-looking lady walked right in. I was confused and didn't know what to say. 1, because I was crapping, and 2, because she was a fine-looking woman. So what came from my mouth joyfully was, "Tickets, please," and then the door closed automatically. I have Hirschsprung's disease, which basically means I was born without the muscles that move poop through the intestines. Basically, when I have to poop, there's no holding it in for a while. I have maybe 5 minutes before I crap myself. So I have many, many poop stories. My favorite happened when I was about 10. I went over to a friend's house, whose mother was a teacher at the school we went to, for the night. Since she's a girl and I'm a boy, we couldn't sleep in the same room, so I had to sleep in her older brother's room, who was about 16. Right before it was time for bed, my friend's mum said not to use the bathroom in the brother's room. I definitely didn't hear this, probably because we were playing Legos or something. Anyway, about 2 a.m. I feel the need and rush to the closest bathroom, her brother's bathroom. I left the beefiest, runny crap I have ever crapped in that poor, poor toilet. There's 3 funny parts to this story. First, there was no water in the bowl. Crap, there was no water in the whole bathroom. Second, everyone knew not to use that bathroom, the door was always shut, so the smell slipped under the nasal radar for like 3 days and the contents of the bowl hardened into poop steel. Lastly, her mum asked me at school if I knew anything about them needing to replace a certain toilet in a certain forbidden bathroom. That's amazing. I worked in a display suite for new apartments. The toilets were always dry. One Saturday morning, we opened up the display to the most foul stench I've ever smelled. It was the middle of summer, and the display suite was all glass with a tin roof so it heated up like a sauna. Trying to find the source of the smell, we realized that someone had crapped in the display toilet last weekend, despite there being no toilet paper or water in the toilet, and being too embarrassed or inconsiderate to tell anybody. So for a week in the middle of Australian summer, this turd sat there festering. It was rancid. The worst part was, because it was in a working environment, it was a biohazard. The company I worked for was too cheap to professionally deal with the issue, so the cleaners tried to vacuum it out, blowing hot poo air out the back of the vacuum, only making the smell worse. It took weeks to get out, and now we seal the toilets shut. Typically, I won't drop a deuce anywhere but my own house, but one time I was at my new girlfriend's house and the situation was dire. I was getting sweaty fighting it. My stomach was making the sound that there were radioactive gases brewing, and I knew I didn't have time to get all the way home. So instead, thinking that I have the bowels of a normal person, I went to the bathroom and destroyed that toilet. Even with the fan on, I'm positive she heard it as if I recorded it for her on my phone. Finally, it was over. I flush and it clogs. I spent a total of 45 minutes in there between the act and the post-war toilet maintenance and lost any smooth points I had with her for the next several months. In conclusion, pooped in my girlfriend's house and went from knight in shining armor to the poopsmith in 45 minutes. So, what happened with you guys? I reckon it all went down the toilet from there. One time when I was little, I wanted to know what it would be like to be blind, so I blindfolded myself. When it was time to pee, I couldn't see the toilet and accidentally peed on the lid and started crying. Not sure if it was my worst or my best. I was peeing when a big sneeze hit me, which made me fart, which for some reason was followed immediately by a burp, which made me snort in laughter, which gave me the hiccups. You deserve an award for that. Is that what number 3 is? Burp snort. I once farted at the exact same time someone texted me. My phone was in my front pocket and set to vibrate. For a split second, I thought I'd farted so hard it was coming out front and back. I was walking into a stall in a subway, as in the underground transportation system, when I slipped in a puddle of pee and stuck my right arm into a pile of unflushed crap in the toilet in front of me, soaking my knees in pee, covering my hand above the wrist in the worst case of the runs I've ever seen, and badly spraining a couple of fingers when they caught on the edge of the toilet when I was catching myself. Then I spewed. I was at my girlfriend's house for the second time and things were still rather tense. I got a terrible stomachache during dinner and had to use the bathroom immediately. The layout of their house was in a way that the bathroom was next to the dining room. Not wanting to make much embarrassing noise, I wisely created a nest of toilet paper on the ground to later transfer the poo into the toilet. Squatting down, I began crapping, lost my balance, fell, hit my head on the counter, and fell unconscious. I was found in a mess of crap when I came to. I feel like this is an unfinished story. What happened when you came to? Not only will this technique prevent splashback, but it will muffle the sound. For our viewers' convenience, the narrator has followed the link provided by that previous commenter. The technique is apparently laying a single piece of toilet paper on the surface of the water, which does wonders for preventing splash and, by extension, UTIs. Academic hall bathroom, senior year of college. Went to take a crap during class. Did not look at the roll beforehand. Go to wipe, no paper. By myself in the bathroom, so I do that sort of haven't wiped my butt crab walk to check out the other stall. No toilet paper in there either. Go to the paper towel dispenser. No paper. Ended up using a handful of gum wrappers I had in my pocket to get enough to walk downstairs to the other bathroom and finish the job. I still have nightmares. Okay, so when I was in the first grade, I went to this hardcore Christian school in Florida, USA. So one day, my class went on a field trip to the library or something along those lines. I just remember them leaving the classroom for about half an hour or so. Anyway, I wasn't allowed to come because the week before I had tied my shoes together in the library, so I got kicked out. So here I am, first grader, alone in the classroom when I feel grumbly in my tumbly. I figure that I have to wait until my teacher gets back before I'm allowed to go to the bathroom, so I patiently wait as the poop pains get more and more intense. Eventually, I am in the corner curled into a ball squeezing my butt cheeks with the force of 1,000 gods. I hear my teacher from down the hall, and as I jump into the air with relief, I crap myself. I straight up crap myself as my entire class enters the classroom. So then, first grader me tries to play it off like nothing's going on, and I sit in my seat and proceed to learn. I'm an idiot. I'd freaking crapped myself. The teacher pulls me out and tells me that the entire class can smell my crap-filled drawers and sends me to the nurse's office while I'm forced to sit on a toilet until my parents can come. I ended up sitting on that toilet with crap covering my legs and crying for about 2 hours. When my parents finally arrived, I had hives covering my legs from that god-forsaken toilet. In conclusion, crapped myself in the first grade, had to sit on the toilet for 2+ hours with crap covering legs, and breaking out in hives. In an Indian restaurant, I went for a pee, and while I was sitting there, I noticed that a few of the tiles were blown, as in they'd come away from the wall. So in my slightly drunken state, I thought, I'll give them a prod. So I did. At that point, a vast quantity of tiles fell off the wall, causing a very loud crash. Everyone in the restaurant heard it. I had to walk back to my table with everyone, including the servers, looking at me. I never went back. When I was in high school, somebody in my family forgot to flush after going number 2. At some point, my dog discovered this and proceeded to treat herself to a snack. I went upstairs after I caught a hint of a very foul smell to find the contents of the toilet dragged across the hallway carpet. My mum and I spent the rest of the night cleaning it. The worst part was how sick my dog got. She spent the next few days vomiting up foamy, brown spew that reeked like you wouldn't believe. Mine would probably be having a violent period the morning after a night out whilst staying with my then-girlfriend in her dorm room, conducted in her ensuite bathroom with little to no sound insulation. I'd snuck out of bed around 6 a.m., praying to every available deity to leave her peacefully sleeping while I experienced my furious bowel vacation. Regrettably, this was not to be. As soon as I sat on the unfortunate porcelain throne, I unleashed a torrent of gas and liquid not usually experienced outside of volcanic eruptions. This was the pyroclastic flow of crapping. The noise was inescapable, and any attempt to control it just resulted in greater volume, except furnished with an embarrassingly puckered nuance. After the storm, I carefully opened the door, once again silently praying that my girlfriend would be clearly asleep, blissfully oblivious to the tarnation I'd just inflicted to her bathroom. Instead, I saw her shaking with laughter under the covers. Possibly not the worst experience one can have with a toilet, as Elvis would no doubt attest, but it was extremely embarrassing. I was on holiday in Florida with my girlfriend, now ex, and her family. Went to the toilet in the hotel room when we got there. Crap was too big to go down the crappy American toilet. Blocked and then proceeded to overflow after I attempted a double flush. Janitor was called, and the look he gave me when he left the bathroom was akin to a Vietnam flashback. In addition to this, the water leaked downstairs into the lobby. In conclusion, took a crap, blocked a toilet, traumatized a janitor, and flooded the lobby. American toilet? In case you didn't realize, Americans are done with taking Europe's crap. One of my good friends earned the nickname Iceberg by doing just this. Be proud of that crap. Clogging someone else's toilet is almost a rite of passage. It's like being a dog who pees on a fire hydrant to claim their territory. It's your toilet, your grounds now. The best part? You clog up the toilet, they fix it for you. First step in dominating your friends and becoming the alpha. When I was about 8, I accidentally zipped the outer skin of my pee-pee up in my zipper. My mum had to come and unzip me, which was not awesome. Things got pretty mangled up, so we're driving to the hospital, and my mum is yelling at my dad, "I told you we should have circumcised him." My dad is yelling at me for being such an idiot, and I'm just bawling my eyes out in the back seat. Good times. Ended up having to get circumcised because the doctor was worried that it would heal up with scar tissue that would cause problems down the line. On the plus side, I got a week off school. At my then-girlfriend's house, and I've got to pee. Excuse myself to take a leak, and I find myself fighting 2 streams. My pee hole was semi-blocked from my self-pleasure activities conducted a few hours previous. Is there a name for this? Typically, the blockage is only temporary, but on this occasion the 2-streamed dragon did not waver. One stream hit the water as the second sprayed the seat, wall, and floor. In hindsight, I should have remedied the trouble by simply squatting lower. In my panic, I used the only available tool I had, my hand, to bank stream 2 back into the bowl. I spent the next 10 minutes cleaning a good amount of pee off the floor and walls. Definitely the time I got locked inside a bathroom stall in the middle of Moscow. I closed and locked the stall door behind me and commenced my business. A lot of vodka the night before was doing a number on me, and I thought about my girlfriend sitting outside wondering what was going on. A few minutes passed, and when I tried to exit, I immediately saw the latch was broken. Completely broken. It wouldn't engage at all. That's when I noticed the claw marks around it. It was half broken and there were pry marks too. Clearly, I was not this toilet's first victim. I panicked and started banging really hard. This was one of those stalls that goes all the way to the floor, so I wasn't crawling out. After a few minutes, I was wedging myself against the back wall and trying to kick it out. I was in full-blown panic mode now. Stuck in a foreign country, I speak a little Russian, but my teacher never taught me, "Help me, I'm stuck in the toilet." The Russian word for help is all I could muster up. After 10 minutes, I began to lose hope. This was deep inside the mall and there was no cell signal on my mobile, so I couldn't even embarrassingly text my girlfriend. After sitting back down and collecting myself, I decided to try and crawl out of the 6-inch space at the top. I shoved my huge winter coat and all my shopping bags one by one over the top of the stall. Then I began to try and scale the wall tile. These were high ceilings. I fell a few times and I heard a lot of Russian men murmuring. I figured all my purchases would be gone. Eventually I squeezed over the top and fell 8 feet down on my butt to a lot of stairs. Then I had to explain why I was in the bathroom for 30 minutes. She didn't even believe me when I told her this story. People who hired a personal investigator. What did you uncover? My mum was an attorney who worked in the workers' compensation insurance. Her colleagues were representing a woman who had been gravely injured on the job and deemed totally unable to work. The opposing attorney hired a PI to investigate this woman. Let's call her Jane. They get to court and present the video footage as their platinum evidence, proving that this woman was totally able to work. Here is Jane mowing her lawn. Here she is unloading her groceries from her car. Here she is walking the dog. Here she is going for a run, etc., etc. Jane's attorneys sat there totally quiet. When it was their turn to cross-examine the PI, they declined any questions. Their turn was up next. Who is the first witness for the opposing side? We would like to call Jane's identical twin sister to the stand. Jane's identical twin had moved in with her bedridden sister after the work accident. Full benefits awarded to Jane. Apparently the look on the faces of the opposing attorneys was the stuff lawyers' dreams are made of. My grandfather once hired a PI. See, he has a large vineyard as well as a few engineering projects he's working on. Well, 2 guys pressed charges on him because they claimed they'd hurt their backs working for him, and he needed to pay for all the medical bills, disability, etc. He thought it was a little fishy and hired a PI. The PI uncovered that they had not actually been hurt and documented the 2 people working at a lumber yard, which has a lot more physical labor than a vineyard. It cost my grandfather a bit to hire him, but way less than what he would have had to pay those 2 scammers. I think this is probably the most common thing a PI does. Probably number 2 on the list, number 1 being catching cheating spouses. There probably is no number 3. I worked as a PI for a couple of years, and it's really not the case. It costs a heck of a lot of money to hire a PA, and just isn't really worth it when all you have to do is catch your spouse tripping up with an undeleted email or a Facebook message. The whole PI to catch a cheating spouse thing is just something you see on TV and movies a lot. That isn't to say it never happens, it's just not the most common thing. It's almost always disability claims or some other legal matters. If you think about it, it really makes sense. When you're threatened with having to pay a crap load of disability money to someone, you have a lot more to lose, and chances are you're a little more able to afford a PI than some stay-at-home wife whose husband works late a little too often. Well, Mr. Former PI, that may be true in the majority of cases, but I will say that in this group of stories it seems like some people have been crazy paranoid enough to hire PIs to spy on their spouses. Starting with the following. My wife hired one. She found that she was wasting money and that I'm a very boring person. We came from different cultures, but we knew we wanted to be with each other. She's Hispanic, born in another country, and I'm a hillbilly from Appalachia. There was a lot of jealousy early on, both sides, because we simply couldn't relate. After a while, I grew tired of being suspicious and told her that if she wanted to be with someone else, to just tell me and I'll move on. But to just tell me. It was very freeing for me. I guess to her, though, it only made her more suspicious. I got off work at 7 a.m. and there wasn't much to do, and not many places that were open for a couple more hours, so I would go to the gym. And I guess she didn't like not being able to account for the gap between me leaving work and me coming back to the apartment. The guy she hired to follow me around was terrible. I had my routine, get off work, go to the gym, go grab some breakfast, hit up Blockbuster, maybe go to a pet store, we had birds and fish. At the time in the morning these places are empty. Like I said, I'm a boring person. Cut to a few days later, I leave the gym and the new guy behind, head to a restaurant and in comes the new guy from the gym. Creepy. I eat, then leave, go to Blockbuster and in he comes. So here I am suspicious. The next day at the gym, I'm telling my buddy about how creepy it was that the new guy shows up everywhere I go and he agrees. I'm done working out and tell my buddy that I'm going to leave and that I'm going to a specific pet store, and if the guy leaves the gym right after me, that my buddy should head to the same pet store. And that was what happened. I go to the store, a couple of minutes later, in walks the guy, and a minute after that, in comes my buddy. We ended up pinning the guy to the floor, I asked why, and he starts saying, "It's just a job," and that he ain't seen nothing. We release him back into the wild with the order that he's not to show up at the gym again. I get home, call her up, and say that she hired the biggest idiot around and that she needs to stop wasting money. She asks, "What happened?" I tell her to ask him since she gave him money. Her jealousy died down after that. Well, that and I made the ultimate quote to her that made sense. I said, "If I was getting laid as much as you think I am, wouldn't I be a lot happier?" And that was that. For those folks hoping for a different ending, sorry to disappoint. We've been together for almost a quarter of a century and everything is fine. Maybe she just couldn't believe that she was involved with someone so boring. If a PI followed me around, goes to work 5 minutes late every day, comes home from work at the same time every day, stays at home until work the next day, stays at home all day on the weekends. I just hope he doesn't reveal what kind of adult content I watch. This pretty much sums up my life. In between work, they would see me take a whole bunch of green herb and watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia for hours. If my significant other hired a PI on me, I'd be fricking livid. Livid's a strange name for a mistress. I worked as a PI one summer for a friend of my dad's. Busted 3 people faking disability claims. Oh man, was that some really boring work. Previous PI here, work is boring, but when it's exciting, it's very exciting. I found out that PIs are pretty damn expensive. My dad's friend is a PI. He charges $45 to $65 an hour, and also charges for whatever gas or transportation fees he incurs while working. He's pretty well off too. Apparently a lot of people need the service, which surprises me. Lots of PIs are contracted out through various police departments as well, and law firms to disprove or limit damages claims in personal injury cases. My mother hired one to follow my father, who's a 6th grade teacher. So he was cheating on my mum with a former student of his who was 14 years old, and my father was 36 at the time. Was jail involved soon after? No, the parents of the girl didn't press any charges as they were pretty okay with it. In fact, he married her soon after. A relative of a friend of mine approached me one day and asked if I could help in finding his brother on the internet somehow. His brother had up and left town with no indication of where he was going, leaving a wife and 2 small children behind. They were not separated and still lived with the kids. He took little more than the clothes on his back. They didn't know if he was in trouble, running from someone, or just a deadbeat. They bought me his passworded desktop PC, which was an XP machine and easily cracked. There wasn't anything in the browser history, the documents folders had nothing, and the machine was relatively blank. I did find a World of Warcraft installation though, and inside that was everything I needed. In the game's screenshots folder, I found several shots of his dwarf talking to a female night elf, very cutesy-like, including some chat lines about being together, and flirty emotes. It was clear what he had done. This turbo nerd had left his family for a night elf. In the screenshots, I could see a few add-ons. One particular World of Warcraft add-on, Pratt, that he had installed has a scrollback chat buffer it saves. I was able to locate the settings file containing that buffer, and in it was his last conversation with her before leaving, including an actual address, 800 miles away. Google provided a name, phone number, and satellite photo of her house and car. They were blown away when I gave them his pinpoint location. He called the number right there on his cell phone and asked for him, and sure enough, he was there, probably shocked to crap to get a call from his brother after this disappearing act. As far as I know, he didn't return home, but I'm sure my little detective work made sure the kids got their child support. In conclusion, Turbo Nerd Dwarf Hunter becomes the hunted. Okay, 2 stories of PIs being used to discover scumbags in a row. That makes a nice break from all the cases of personal injury claims. What crappy dads. I hope they got drained for everything they were worth in child support. My uncle hired one to follow his wife after she gave some signs of an affair. She was the principal of a school and claimed she had to work long hours or would attend every single school event and function and would be gone long hours or go on business trips, among other things. Turns out she was totally having relations with the vice principal. He got camera footage of them going to her house during lunch breaks for a quickie on my uncle's bed. He got other footage as well of them meeting up numerous times. It was never confirmed, but some kids at the school later claimed she and the VP had done it in their office. After it all came to light, it dawned on all the other aunts and uncles the many times my aunt would drop off her daughter at random times and random nights at our houses because she had a spontaneous school function and needed a babysitter. It was also mysterious when she surprised my uncle with chest augmentation surgery, which turns out was for the other guy. How does one surprise their spouse with elective surgery? Do they just roll over in bed and say, "Look what the melon fairy left, honey"? In 2005, my mother had suspicions that my father was cheating on her whenever he would go to the Dominican Republic, so she hired an investigator in DR who began to watch my father. The PI express mailed her some pictures of my father and some young woman kissing, dancing, going into hotel rooms, the works. She later found out that the woman was the mother of my father's illegitimate daughter, my half-sister. My father got her a visa and she is living with us now in the States. I was trying to locate a former business account who had failed to return some of my property. PI quickly determined she used several different names, several different birth dates, sometimes claiming to be a senior citizen, and had used 20 different addresses in the previous few years, all over the country. PI was as baffled as I was, said she was either a con artist or mentally ill, or both. Anyways, too bad for her, her new employer had issued a press release about her hiring. Rather than contacting her, I'd already tried that, I'd exchanged some emails with her without results, I contacted her new boss. UPS man delivered my property to my door 2 days later. My mum is a divorce attorney, and she has one she recommends to her clients when necessary. It's all about hiding money. I've talked to the guy and basically he does a lot of online research and looking at money statements and stuff. Sounds actually really boring. I have not hired one, but my now father-in-law hired one when I first started dating his daughter. Funny part is, I was working in the port, with ships, when I stopped at the guard shack and told them that I was being followed by some strange person. The PI pulled up next and had 3 port police officers pull guns on him and tell him to get out of the car. I think he ended up going to jail. Laughed my butt off, but I did sort of feel bad. I would have called the dad up and offered him anything he wanted to know, at only half the cost. My uncle was a PI for a while. He mostly worked for insurance groups and lawyers to make sure the correct person was being served or prosecuted. He would have to figure out stuff like who burned the farm down, John Smith Jr. or John Smith Sr. Was Jane Doe the divorcee or the third wife? One time, this kid wrecked his Ferrari. Kid ended up posting his version of the wreck on MySpace. He told how he'd intentionally wrecked it because his parents didn't get him the Ferrari he wanted. It was very Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec. My mum is a PI. She's asked me to go into bars and adult clubs with her on multiple occasions to observe individuals. Both made sense to remain inconspicuous as well as her own safety. Let me just say, you've never really been to an adult club until you go with your mum. She was trashing girls left and right out of earshot. About 10 years ago, my cousin was deployed in Afghanistan on his second tour. During phone calls back home, his daughter made mention of a new uncle he didn't know existed. My aunt decided to hire a PI for him and found out his wife was cheating with a doctor. Of course, he was heartbroken. The divorce that followed was quick. However, there is a bright side to this. After switching to a reserve unit, he was able to finish college and go to law school. His ex-wife? She was dumped by the doctor not long after the divorce. She attempted to reconcile, but my cousin refused. He's remarried. She lives with a group of friends in some run-down house. When I was 10, my parents separated and went through a nasty divorce. Sometime during all of that, he hired a PI to follow my mum around. The PI concluded that my mother was a working girl. She did escort service and hung around the doctor's conventions. The PI took photos and logged everything. My dad snuck into the house my mother and I lived in with a camcorder and recorded the discovery of a ledger containing all of her clients and the money exchange. He leveraged it in the divorce so he didn't get bent over entirely. My dad didn't tell me any of this until I was 17 or so. I didn't believe it until I thought back and remembered some things. She had a pager, and back in the 90s only a few types of people had pagers: doctors and working girls. She would suddenly be gone late at night if I woke up. She would always say she was out grocery shopping. I also remember walking in on her wearing a revealing dress made of leather. No more revealing than what girls wear to the club, but hey, that crap is weird when it's your mum and you're 10. Anywho, my dad still throws it at me when he wants to prove how much better of a person he is than my mother or my stepdad, who married a working girl. In her defense, she was paying her way to become an RN, which she is now. In conclusion, PI followed my mum for my dad during a nasty divorce. Found out she was a working girl. Dad holds grudge to this day and tells his kids about it. And another piece of evidence that many spouses apparently hire PIs to discover cheating spouses. Okay, so I'll bite. Nothing like hunting down a psycho ex or anything like that, but it's interesting enough. So I was living in England and had an uncle living in assisted living in California. He was 95 at the time, a little fuzzy about some things, but on the whole, sharp as a tack. He was deeply religious and attended church weekly. A couple of women from the church had made friends with him, drove him to church, bought him trinkets and whatnot, and basically took care of him, sort of. Sounded okay to me. Heck, I was in England, what was I going to do? The only thing that jarred me a little bit was one time when I was talking to the woman on the phone, one of them told me that my uncle had signed over power of attorney to them. That struck me as a little odd. My uncle and I weren't really close, but being his heir, along with my brother, wouldn't he have told me about it? I shrugged it off, though. Again, what was I going to do? I was 6,000 miles away. Besides, and this is what gets a lot of people, he was of sound mind. He was a free agent, so it was really none of my fricking business. A year or two go by, I check on him periodically and everything seems fine. I come home one night and my phone is ringing. It's the assisted care residence. Crap, what's happened? Is he dead? He's 97 fricking years old. I was expecting it any day. No, it's these two little old ladies. They're trying to get my uncle to sign over power of attorney to them. Wait a minute, hadn't he already done that? The alarm bells go off. Something is deeply wrong, and it was going to make at least 24 hours to get back to California, given connections, flights, renting a car, blah blah blah. So I call a PI from England, tell him the situation, and as soon as I can get to the part about the women, he stops me and says, "Wait, let me tell you how this story goes." He then proceeds to tell me that this is a common scam. These women cruise the churches looking for these little old guys who on the surface have no family to speak of and healthy retirement and investment accounts. So I get my butt back to California ASAP. Unfortunately, my uncle has signed nothing. Although at this point, they're pushing him hard. They'd even kidnapped him and taken him to an attorney and tried to get him to sign over POA to them. Little did they know who they were dealing with. My dad's side of the family sets the gold standard for stubbornness. I learned this early on when my dad said no, that was it, give it up, because that was an answer that was not going to change. My uncle, all 100 pounds and 97 years of him, had dug in his heels. So we signed over POA to me, and now the hunt begins. Where were his accounts? These women handed over nothing to me, a few receipts but no accounts, nothing. So this PI and I ended up hanging out for a few days, tracking everything down. I can't begin to tell you how much I learned from this man, a complete original. Vietnam vet, former Navy SEAL, carried a knife in his boot and a gun in his shoulder holster. So he shows me it's mostly research, and that I resonate to since I work in research. Painstaking, boring, turning over one pebble at a time kind of investigation. Knowing how to talk to people, how to observe. It requires a massive amount of patience. We went to every bank within 20 miles, and by schmoozing and showing my POA, we found what we thought was every account. I then went over everything. They had played a shell game, borrowing from him, hadn't quite stolen from him, but it took quite a while to figure out what they'd done. Then I find the pièce de résistance. They had him sign over all of his retirement accounts to them, or more specifically to the younger one being a spry 81 years old. So we do some further investigation. Turns out this one is broke. Looks like she sent it back to the Philippines or something. She spent a lot of time in Vegas. So here's how it shakes out, a common scam. These two little Jezebels made a play for my uncle, who fell for the younger one, hook, line and sinker. They get him to sign over all of his retirement accounts to them, and then all they have to do is outlive him. At 81 and 83, respectively, with my uncle 96, it should be easy. So I confront them, told them that I knew what they were doing and I had the evidence. I didn't really, I only strongly suspected, and that I could turn them in. So they spilled the beans, told me what they'd done. They swore that they had only borrowed the money. We signed it all back over, I didn't turn them in, I figured it would all come out in the wash anyway. I didn't want to see them go to jail, and I wasn't sure I could prove it anyway. But if it wasn't for this PI who had my back, they would have gotten away with it. I'm a firm believer now, I learned a crap ton for him. Now for the editorial. This crime is rampant, intimidating, bamboozling, and ripping off the elderly. Most DAs won't touch it. If you even get a whiff that an elderly relative is being abused or ripped off, if it even crosses your mind, step in immediately. Kick butt and take names. You may be the only defense they have. But I'll tell you, it turned out to be one of the most interesting experiences of my life. My uncle got the last laugh. He outlived both of them and passed away peaceably at 100 years old, with me there with him. One of the last things he told me was that he had forgiven them for what they'd done. In conclusion, elderly uncle is nearly scammed out of $500,000 by a couple of Jezebels cruising the churches. PI steps in and saves the day. I learn a crap ton. We discovered that the driver who hit me not only went off the side of the road where I was, legally four-wheeling on a quad, she was talking on the cell phone, looking into the passenger seat, driving with no insurance and a revoked license because of previous convictions for causing accidents. After the truck, pushing my quad into a T-boned position, plowing up so much dirt in front of us that after 70 feet it finally came up to a halt. The investigator had evidence that she was driving 35 miles per hour in a 25 zone and she didn't brake after the impact. After the truck came to a stop, she jumped out and started running away, but witnesses caught her and held her there. My friend, who was sitting behind me, both of us 14, were carted off in ambulances and I never saw this woman's face. The trooper wrote the report that I, 14 years old, had taken an RV instead of an ATV and pulled out in front of the woman, though it was clear the accident happened off the roadway. The trooper interrogated me while I was lying on the ground waiting for ambulances before my parents even arrived. I was in shock while he rephrased the question, "Have you had any alcoholic or illegal substances today?" several times. My neighbors finally asked him to wait until my parents arrived. In the hospital room, he questioned me further while my parents were on their way. The nurse had to ask him to stop as my neck was being evaluated, and I had not even had pain medication yet. The accident was deemed my fault, although there were 2 eyewitnesses who testified against the woman to the trooper, and later in court I was told by the DMV I would have to pay the woman's truck damages before I was allowed to get a driver's license, and I carried SR22 insurance for 5 years after I received it. The investigator uncovered proof that the trooper knew the woman who hit me and was possibly friends with her. For the months in between the accident and when the investigation was complete, I fought an awful amount of guilt, believing it was my fault and not having any memory of the accident. My friend's leg was badly injured and required extensive surgeries over the next 5 years, and she was visiting from Texas and had to be medevaced back there via helicopter, which left her family with a huge financial burden. During that time, I even considered taking my own life and took one attempt that thankfully failed. My parents took the case to the state Supreme Court over the course of the next 3 years, and when we finally came to trial, the judge said the only way the report could be cleared and the financial obligations relieved is if the state trooper took back his statement. When we began going that route, we were told the trooper had been dismissed from the force for wrongful behavior, and his testimony was worth noting. That was an expensive lesson in corruption. The financial stress contributed greatly to my parents' divorce. However, if we hadn't hired the investigator, we may have went on thinking it was my fault. I'm very thankful to know that it truly wasn't. Teachers. What's something a student of yours has said that made you lose hope for them? Principal at an inner-city high school. I had to sit down with a student who had been caught plagiarizing for a second time. This time, from The Onion. I had a student use The Onion as a source. Specifically this one. Barry Bonds took performance-enhancing substances, reports everyone who has ever watched baseball. Hey now, the inability to tell satire from news is a really popular style of idiocy these days. There was this kid named Lawrence who was one of those typical wallflower Catholic kids I grew up with. His dad was in our scout troop as a leader and was really meticulous. Like everything had to be just so. In the late 70s, most of the troop leaders had a relaxed dress code. But Lawrence's dad dressed like a 1940s scouting manual model, complete with brown uniform and wide-brimmed hat. Everything was pleated and pressed. His dad drove an old MG Roadster that was constantly breaking down. They were upper class and his mum was not in the picture. But the way Lawrence's dad picked on him was brutal. Stand up straight, Lawrence. Chin up. Be a good lad. Chest out. Chin up. Lawrence, don't go over there. It's dirty over there. Lawrence, stand straight and tall when I address you. Don't be rude. Wait until I've started eating before you start. Lawrence, do I have to raise my voice, Lawrence? By high school, Lawrence just gave up. He wasn't perfect enough, so why bother? He stared into space, he attended school in person only, just a blank and hollow shell. His clothing didn't change, it only became dirtier. His hair got long, he lost weight, and his clothes just hung on him. I think the only way to deal with his dad's control issues was passive resistance. By his senior year in high school, he flunked out. Not sure what happened to him after that. High school teacher here. Dude, if you don't start coming to class and doing the work, you'll fail out of school. School's done nothing for me. I'm gonna rap to pay the bills, bro. Kid was an awful musician. Couldn't make a beat, couldn't write a rhyme to save his life. I've now had 3 successful rappers graduate from my class. Years later, 2 of them have given up on the whole thing as more than a hobby, and 1 is still touring Europe. So when I have some kid rap terribly at me and say that's how he's going to make his money as an excuse for not doing anything in my class, I just laugh and then advise them to work on their flow. I work at an arts high school that attracts a lot of talented kids. You can still tell who's going to actually have a career in the arts because only a small number have the correct combination of dedication and talent, and an even smaller subset have humility and the ability to work with others. Yep, I have a friend I consistently second-guessed when he went on about the fact he was gonna make it one day. Didn't believe him, but he made it. Then again, he was always supremely talented, and I guess he finally figured out how to work hard in the end. Kid. Totally serious. I'm gonna drop out. I'll make money off YouTube. How many views are your videos getting? Kid. I have 4 subscribers, so I just need a few more. I had a student who has a severe mental disability, but was quite gifted in maths. But he's told myself, other adults in the room, the special education department head, and school psychologist he is going to drop out of high school to be a YouTuber. Mum and Dad are in serious denial of this fact, but he's dead set on it. You can see it in his eyes. In other news, it seems that the generation of students I have now want to be either YouTubers or professional video games players. I was born in the late 80s, and when I was their age, I remember having classmates being sternly told the actual statistics of them becoming professional athletes. I still have 2 to 3 classmates, graduated high school in 2007, that are dead set on making it into the NFL, but never played in high school or college. I feel this is the same with kids I'm seeing now. They don't truly understand the extremely low chance of them becoming pro in social media. Because they're growing up watching these people, of course they want to be like them. Just like the kids of our generation wanted to be movie stars or professional athletes. It's just that the world is moving into a digital age. Incident number 1. Can we just not learn this? It's hard. We should skip it. Incident number 2. I don't have to get good grades. My grandfather owns a house, and when he dies, my family is going to sell it for $1 million, so I won't ever have to get a job. I have a distant aunt like that. Screwed my mother and all her siblings and close family over, manipulating her father to change the will on his deathbed. She wanted all the money so she'd never have to work again. She spent it all inside 6 months and is now completely broke. She destroyed any shred of love any of my family had for her. Really, truly a horrible person. My wife told me this story about the time she was lecturing a kid on why he should try to do well in school. She asked him what he wanted to be when he grows up. His response, I want to be in jail. That's where my dad and uncle is. She had no response, probably the only time in her career that she was left speechless by a student. Frick, that's actually really sad. How about, if you study you could get a job as a guard in their jail and make life nice for your dad and uncle as well as seeing them every day. I had a student who was always acting up. I constantly tried talking to him about his behavior, and I wrote plenty of referrals. Throughout all of this, I would email and call his mother, but never got a response. One day, he was pacing around and texting someone. I told him to put his phone away, and he said, I can't, I'm not too happy right now. So I said, will you take it out into the hall and I'll give you 1 minute? His response really shook me. He said, no, I'll sit down. I just want my mom to turn the water back on. When all you know about a student is what you see in the classroom, it's easy to forget that they may not have a great home life. So I did wonder, is there any hope for him? But it also wasn't truly any fault of his own. He just had a crap home life where he was stricken by poverty. This is how my niece is. It's terrible. She's 15 and should be worrying about school and college. Instead, she worries about getting the younger kids up, getting them dressed and fed. On Monday, she kept asking me if I could drop off some bread and milk and cereal. It's just so frustrating because there are 3 adults in that house and none of them work. They're just junkies. We have called Child Protection Services more times than we can count. Her mother had her at 15 and then just kept having kids. My sister-in-law also grew up in a similar home to the one she's providing now. I really just think it's one of those cycles that she just can't break. Her thought process is, I grew up like this, so why make it any different from my kids? All 4 of them have different dads and only one of them has a dad that's involved. I want to be a substance dealer, but the cool kind. You know, the ones that wear a suit and carry a briefcase. He was 17 at the time and completely serious. He was expelled a month later for jumping another student. When is the teacher coming? This wasn't the first lesson I had with this child. I teach computer science in university. I get a lot of freshmen that picked the major because they heard it was a high-paying major, but don't actually like the subject they're in. The worst was a recent student that asked if they could just do the assignments by hand. They don't want to use a computer, they didn't really like using them. People use computers too much. I don't start doing that. Also thought computers could do too much and wanted people to stop using them. Bruh, this is a programming course for computers, in a major about making computers do things. You're going to need to use a computer. Needless to say, I told them this probably wasn't the major for them. Is it just me, or does it sound like everyone's elderly parents complaining at the pace the world is moving in? A true old soul already, and this comment was from 2016, when we'd all been solidly using laptops at uni for a decade. I used to teach science in public high school, had to convince a sophomore that trees came from seeds, and I blew his mind. I had one 4-year-old who couldn't hold a pencil. He couldn't remember how to pick it up and didn't have the strength to push it down hard enough on the paper to get any leverage. He couldn't color, had no motor skills whatsoever. He didn't have a dominant hand. His parents liked to leave him at my learning center for an hour, even though he couldn't use the bathroom on his own. He was 4 years old and didn't have the slightest grasp of the alphabet and couldn't retain anything we taught him. It took a month to get him to count to 10. My theory on all of this is that on top of a learning disability or developmental delay, his mum was in denial, and of course he was a natural lefty, who was forced to use his right hand, but because of his disability, he couldn't, and ended up not developing any motor skills in either hand. Poor kid. Had a 4th grader say he didn't need school because he was going to have a wife and she would do everything. Same student, while disrupting the entire class, also said, What are you gonna do? I know you can't hit me." At the time, the kid was visiting the school social worker multiple times a week. Dad wouldn't hold a job while Mum did everything and learned from Dad to disrespect rules and that getting into trouble meant nothing. Kid was expelled shortly after that for beating and holding another student against the wall and threatening to kill him. We wish we could have done something for the kid, but it was a small private school with limited resources and the parents didn't help with reinforcement. We were happy when the parents pulled the two older kids out as well, since they were starting to cause a lot of problems as well. I taught lower elementary. Most teachers will get frustrated at some point by how hard it can be to get a child who may be lacking upstairs some extra help. This was the case with one of my favorite students. It didn't matter that he couldn't do any of the work that his peers were doing due to his incredibly low IQ, he was performing at his ability level, but he was just so nice to everyone. I had set time aside every day to help him with his reading. We were using the short story of The Ugly Duckling. It had one short sentence on each page, and after 2 weeks, he could get through it with minimal help. However, reading the words isn't all there is to reading. I had asked him if he could tell me what the story was about, since we had spent time on it every day for the last 2 weeks. He started his oral retelling off great, and I'm super excited. This is a huge deal for my man because up until this point, I couldn't get any retell or comprehension out of him. I'm super pumped and he is feeding off my energy, and he's so proud of himself. This kid is glowing. We're only 3/4 of the way through the story though, and we come up to the end of The Ugly Duckling, and he's telling me that the duckling changes. This word took us forever to say, much less read, but then he stops and goes into his deep thinking stage. I prod him a little bit. He changes? What does he change into there, buddy? He brings his eyes back from the ceiling, and then with the biggest smile, he shouts out, "A butterfly!" A girl, 8th grade, told me she wanted to have kids, 2 to 3, by the time she was 18, so she could have the energy to keep up with them and then work the pole to support them. My wife had a student in 3rd grade who refused to do any writing assignments. My wife told him that she was going to call his parents to explain what was going on if he didn't start doing his work. He said, "I don't care. My mom said I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. Rules don't apply to me." My wife called his mum, and his mum told my wife that she, meaning my wife, just has to understand how her son is, and if he doesn't want to do the work, then he doesn't have to. His behaviors all made sense after that, and it was a very tough year. He stopped doing all work and started harassing other kids, probably partially due to boredom, since he was doing nothing else by the end of the year. As long as he was happy, my wife couldn't get the mum on board. "I ain't doing any of that crap. My mum already said she's signing the papers, to drop out, as soon as I turn 16. Look, I know that many people often drop out and end up going back to get a GED. I sincerely hope this young man turns his life around. He'd had an incredibly tough upbringing, and along with that, a history of violent conduct in and out of school. I tried my best to remain patient with him in my room and to motivate him any way I could. At the point he said those words, I just don't think there was anything more I could do. That was last year, and he hasn't been back to school this year. I really hope that at some point he figures things out and gets his life going in a positive direction, whatever that might be. University professor here. A student last term never purchased the textbook and thus never did his homework. He sat in the back and spaced out all class, failed one exam, and barely passed the other. He came to me during the final week of class to ask me if he could do all of his missed assignments and then ask why I didn't remind him to do them. Bro, this is university. I am not chasing after you. I had one who stopped coming to class for the last 6 weeks of the semester, and instead of writing the essay on the exam, wrote a 2-page rant about how unfair it was of me to base the exam on stuff that happened in class. Also in the rant, complains about how I had not called her to remind her to do assignments, come to class, or find out what was on the exam. A good reminder that many students aren't too far removed from school kids. No judgment, I was a moron in my first year of uni. Also, these two both seem in the making to become prime Karens. I work at an alternative school for kids kicked out of public school for severe emotional and behavioral issues. A lot of them are going to require government services for the rest of their lives. There's usually not just one thing they say, but we know that they will never have normal lives. It's a little disheartening to hear a 6-year-old scream that he's going to fricking kill you, especially when you were playing tag not 5 minutes before. There's a young boy who can be very sweet and is an adorable blonde butterball. However, he has pretty severe behavioral problems and gets restrained at some point on a daily basis. I saw his parents one day because they live in government-subsidized housing close by and walk him to school. It was 50 degrees out and the little boy was in a basketball jersey and shorts. His parents looked exactly how I expected them to look and were rude to all the staff they interacted with. It showed me that no matter how much we do, he spends most of his life with his crappy parents. Having a child with behaviors doesn't inherently make someone a bad parent, but in our program specifically, most of the students come from harsh backgrounds which either causes or exacerbates their behavior. I had a student say, "I don't need to learn any of this. I won't use it in real life." When I tried to explain why math was going to be useful, he responded, "You're a dumb idiot. Watch me get rich without even going to school." I mean, it's been done, but probably not the best idea. Paraphrased, are we ever going to use this as an adult? I mean, you won't, but some of the smart kids will. I worked in vet clinics for 15 years. Here's an example of something I heard every day. Me. "Okay, go ahead and set the carrier on the scale." Owner. "Do you want me to take the cat out?" No, we don't want the cat loose in the clinic. Just go ahead and put the carrier with the cat on the scale. Owner puts the cat carrier on the scale. I write down the weight. "Okay, let's head into the exam room." "But how much does the cat weigh?" "When we get you into a secured room, we'll get the cat out and weigh the carrier." "But how will you know how much the cat weighs?" Algebra. This happens every day. I had one student at a bilingual school in Mexico, who after being at the school and supposedly learning English for 5+ years, still couldn't speak it and barely tried to make any effort to learn anything, didn't do assignments and failed almost every test. When we mentioned it to her parents, their attitude was that she doesn't really need it because she'll just marry someone who'll take care of everything for her. My thought was, who would want to marry someone who doesn't know anything and makes no effort? Just this week, I have a student in grade 5 that's pretty oppositional, has a tough home life, etc. He doesn't always try very hard, but sometimes I can see he's trying to put in some effort. We were talking about how I grade them, and he interrupts the conversation with, "I don't care at all about my grades." And I thought, here we go, another rant about how unfair school is. I just want to know that I can keep getting better. Perfect. I got chills. Thank goodness. Excuse me for diverting from the subject momentarily. Sometimes I just need a more uplifting story in the middle of all this gloom. This is probably going to be buried, but I like to reference this one from time to time. I had a student who was a hoarder. He was one of those kids that we all remember who had the backpack that was filled with everything for every class. It looked like this kid carried around a small grocery cart on his back. One day I'm walking him to his locker to look for an assignment that I knew I'd given him before, and I smelled this nasty smell. Big surprise, it's his locker. Open it to find 89 cartons of chocolate milk stacked inside. That's not all. On the floor, he had a pretty large mason jar filled with what looked like dead bugs. I asked him why he had so much milk in his locker, and he said, stone-faced, "To dip the bugs in." Never sure what happened to this kid when he left, but that was the most disturbing for me. I'm a second-grade teacher, and I have a boy who lies constantly about anything. He was on camera watching the footage of himself punching a student in the face, and he crossed his arms and said, "If I didn't do it, then I didn't do it." The worst part is his mum believes every word he says and attacks the school for making him accountable for his actions. He's going to do something as an adult and go to jail. When they pull him away, I know he's going to be yelling, "If I didn't do it, I didn't do it!" 7th grade in the US. On the first day of class, the students each said what they did over the summer. One kid said he went to Germany. The kid sitting next to him audibly asked where that was, and if it was further away than Chicago. I thought he must have misunderstood what the first guy said, so I intervened. Chicago is about 100 miles away. Germany is in Europe. That's another continent entirely. The kid looked blankly at me and asked me what that was. The word continent. I was dumbfounded and gestured at the map of the world on the wall and pointed at the continents, thinking he must have learned to pronounce them differently or something. But nope, he literally didn't know what they were and never realized that the picture on the wall of the geography room was actually a map of the world? He was in 7th grade and he didn't know what a continent was, or have even a toddler's level of understanding of what a map was. I once had a student who didn't know what the answer to 5 times 5 was. This was in the preparatory year of a private medical university. Fear for the patients if she ever graduates. My mum is a nursing instructor and she has horror stories of people who have become nurses. The bad students are rude and entitled, and they either skip work, lie on it, or expect my mum to do every assignment with them, step by step after class. When the student starts to fail because they're not meeting the standards, the people above my mum will give them the alternative, easy busy work assignments, so they can pass the program and the school will start to have good statistics. So if you get a nurse someday who's a butthole or seems like an idiot, then they probably are. Me. What country did the United States gain independence from? Student. Hispanic. Tynesha, that's an ethnicity. Nuh-uh, it's a country in Africa. Me, internally. Tynesha, you're freaking 13, what the hell? And then externally, okay, can someone help Tynesha answer the question? Another student, France. I teach English in Japan and sometimes hear, I don't understand this because I'm Japanese. What a well-constructed sentence for a Japanese person. Well, they say it in Japanese. I had a senior say he didn't think it was fair. I've grown to hate that word, by the way. He didn't think it was fair that my exams used short answer questions instead of multiple choice. She said, some of us just aren't good writers. I responded that if you're a senior in college and can't string a few sentences together, something has gone wrong. She stormed out of class. My college juniors and seniors, yes plural, who tried to justify the Holocaust because there were a lot of Jewish people in Europe at the time. To make it worse, almost half of my family died in the Holocaust. They don't know this, not that it matters. Had my Year 2 private student try to turn over his study table on me. It didn't work, I slammed it down, and then screamed at me to write out his homework because that's what his mum pays me for. There's still hope, but it made me so sad and angry as he assumed I was of a lesser position than him just because I was being paid. Like, yeah, nah, bye. Minimum wage workers. What customer rules aren't you paid enough to actually enforce? I worked graveyard at a Jack in the Box near a community college. The line would get so long, I decided to give out a mystery treat to every passenger in the car. From free orange juice to Jumbo Jacks, everyone was a winner. Reminds me of the time I went to Taco Bell late one night and ordered a single taco, and when I came to grab my order from the drive-thru, I got a huge sack of like 20 tacos. I hit the mega jackpot. People sleeping in their cars overnight. I consistently work night shifts and see it all the time. We're meant to tap the windows and ask them to leave, but really, if someone has to sleep in their car and we have a huge empty car park, why kick someone while they're down? My favorite old folks aren't usually charged as much as they should be. I'm not about to tack on an extra 50 cents for extra peanut butter. If someone was awful to me, you bet your butt they would be paying the full price. I'd also give away muffins that wouldn't be sold the next morning. Super against the rules according to the boss because it encourages vagrants. But I also told my manager it was a dumb rule and I was doing it anyway, but wouldn't say where they were from. He didn't mind and didn't let the boss know. It didn't increase vagrants coming in, no harm, no foul. Sometimes those muffins were my meal of the day too. At Christmas, I forgot to charge someone for the box of groceries they were getting as a special treat for their kids. She was someone that always came in just for a coffee and for a treat on Fridays, and was the nicest lady living on a small pension. She'd always rather spend money on someone else, so she deserved it. Yup, giving away muffins is a love language to your favorite customers in hospitality. I remember that feeling of giving the nice ones something for being decent folks. Made for great regular customers who would brighten your day next time they came in. I worked at an airline. The minimum change fee was $75. At the time, that amount of money would take me about 10 hours to earn. Let me tell you how many ways I found to waive that fee. Oh, what a great conversation about weather. Let me waive that fee for you. Oh, and your child is crying in the background. Let me waive that fee for you. I found any reason to waive that. In Disney World, I worked at Cirque du Soleil. They would throw away all the food at the end of the night, but nothing got me more upset than the cotton candy. It cost them like 15 cents a bag to make, but sold it for $5.50, and then they would throw it away. I used to grab bags and give them to the guests for free. Also gave away popcorn and hot dogs and stuff. No use letting it go to waste. The Cirque team was extremely small, maybe 14 employees on payroll, with about 8 on shift at a given time. Yet we serviced over 6,400 people in 2 shows each day. A typical shift went like this. Go in at 4 p.m. and prepare for 6. Management will give you how many hot dogs, cotton candy, pretzels, and popcorn to make. When 5:30 rolled around, we opened the doors and sold. Then, after the show finishes at 7:30, live show, so it varied, we would restock depending on how good we did during the first show, and the number we're expecting for the second. We make adjustments and prepare for the next show. Around 8:30, we open the doors, sell. Once the show is on, there will rarely be someone buying stuff. They spent $80 a ticket to watch an 85-minute show. I'd be darned if they were going to miss a second of it. After the show, 3,200 people are rushing out, so when the theater was about 80% empty, if I knew we were going to have an abundance of stuff left over, I was doing it long enough to accurately gauge, I'd just give it away. No harm done. I worked at the Costco hot dog stand. One of my coworkers volunteer tested at an animal shelter. She would take the extra hot dogs at the end of the night and bring them to the shelter to feed the dogs. Management found out and fired him over it. It teed me off because he stole nothing but garbage. People paying with expired coupons for anything that wasn't medicine. I worked in retail pharmacy and we had to let customers make their front store purchases at the pharmacy if they wanted to. I just scanned all the expired coupons anyway because it wasn't worth the trouble of having an argument with the customer and increasing the amount of time that they were on the line. Obviously, with those RX coupons, it was another story, as overriding that could be considered insurance fraud. At minimum wage, the only things I would care about are the things that would get me arrested or would keep me up at night. Not a worker, but I was being assisted by a minimum wage worker at a chain arcade. Me and my friend were figuring out what we could afford to get from the little rewards area, and we started to sit down and begin counting. He saw us and said, "No, don't worry, they don't pay me enough to care." We still felt bad, so we put some of the candy we got back. He started scanning our point cards and the rewards. We had an extra 5 to 10 pieces of candy, and he was like, "Oh, looks like you can't afford it." Then he slid all of the candy into the bag and handed it to us. 10 out of 10 employee. I hope he's doing well. I work at a pizza joint that has a redemption center, kinda like Chuck E. Cheese. I do this all the time, especially for birthday kids. If it's their birthday and they want something, I just ask them, "Well, it's your birthday? What do you want? Pick anything you like." They want the thing that has 1,000 tickets? Fine. It costed us $5, and your parents probably gave you $10 anyway. It's your birthday. You just go be a prince or princess. A couple of years ago, I worked at a deli inside of a Walmart neighborhood market, aka just groceries. Every 3 hours, we had to mark rotisserie chickens and other foods on the hot plates down 50%. If people were kind or looked like they could use some help, I would mark them down almost any time. I couldn't tell you how many folks came in who I would just give a few extra slices of cheese or ham to for free, and just how their faces lit up. They definitely needed it more than Walmart. Having worked in multiple movie theaters, I can tell you that the ushers absolutely give 0 Fs about you trying to sneak food in from the outside. It's a minimum wage job, they have no interest in hassling people or getting into a confrontation over the bag of peanut M&Ms in your purse. It's a million times easier to just turn a blind eye. There was one family that used to come to the movies almost every week. They would always bring their grandma, who was in a wheelchair, and she always had a box of pizza on her lap covered by a shawl, and this was obvious to everyone. It's a fresh, hot pizza, for frick's sake. You can smell it from 30 feet away. I honestly just thought about telling them that I didn't care if they were bringing in food, but then I thought that maybe that's the only reason they brought grandma, and I didn't want to take that away from her. I love the extra little considerate touch of holding your tongue to specifically make sure that the grandma is continued to be included in family movie night. Although it would be pretty callous of the family to just cut her out once they knew they could bring pizza themselves. I used to work in town at an auto parts store with a lot of gang activity. Every now and then, some monstrously muscular dude covered in tats would walk in and grab 2 batteries off the rack. We assumed for the hydraulics most were using, and walk out. We would just wave and say, "Have a nice day," rather than get the crap beat out of us. We'd just write it off as a store loss. Using the bathroom if you aren't actually a customer. We're the only place open at 3 in the morning. I'm not going to tell people to go find somewhere else. I had this backfire a number of times on me, actually. After relenting on the not a public restroom rule, people just messed the entire bathroom up to say thank you. Years back, I worked at a local chain restaurant that had a drive-thru. One of the owners would occasionally come through and reiterate that we were only to give 1 ketchup packet per order of fries at the drive-thru. Our fry orders were huge and 1 packet was nowhere near enough, so as soon as he was gone, we'd go back to throwing handfuls of ketchup packets into the bags. Long time ago, I ordered a bunch of Taco Bell for myself and 4 friends. It was about 2 a.m. and we were surf fishing in a small SoCal town. Anyway, after the highly stoned worker handed me my huge bag of fries, he asked me what kind and how much sauce I wanted. I replied, "A frick ton of mild, please," and he proceeded to hand me an entire box of it. I work as a lifeguard at a theme park, first job, and one thing some customers do is pretend they're going to faint or they're having heat-related problems, so they can get us to call into base and get them free food or drinks. Sometimes I really wish I was a bad person. They really do know how to game the system. Not me, but my boyfriend worked a store in a large mall. The store refuses to put security sensors in because it ruins the laid-back vibe of the store. They wanted you to chase shoplifters. One girl working there almost got maced. A male coworker was threatened to be stabbed. He just didn't care and wouldn't chase. He would just tell the manager on duty what happened. Some of the managers never listened. The security in the mall is awful. So bad that a different store a friend was working at where their employees actually got attacked for trying to stop a shoplifter, that store hired their own private security to protect their employees. Nobody working minimum wage should get threatened to be fired for not chasing shoplifters who are threatening them bodily harm. I've worked a ton of retail jobs. When they do training about shoplifting, the first thing every single one said was never ever chase a shoplifter. Get a good look at them and call the cops, but it's not your job to catch criminals, and it's illegal to detain people. All you can do is call the cops. If the item doesn't have a price, I usually just let the customer name it if they're nice. We're supposed to have someone check the price, but that usually takes an incredibly long time, and as everyone's busy, I save that for the buttholes. I worked at a deli and I had the power to override the price per pound anytime I felt like it. So if a customer was upset, I'd give them half off. Or if they had a cool shirt, I didn't really care. This reminds me of when I worked in a supermarket and got minimum wage. They would sometimes ask me to work the bakery. I'd give the kids free cookies and then offer one to the parent. I read here that Dairy Queen requires you to charge for anything extra when ringing someone up. But after you purchase it, if you ask the person making it for extra whatever, they throw it in for free. Soda in a water cup. My local McDonald's has a rule where you have to pay $1 for a water cup, so I took a ketchup holder and filled it up. Aren't those really tiny? Yeah, the struggle is real. Shots, 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 shots! I work at an online diaper bag company, and if a bag was returned, I was supposed to find out if it was a defect or the customer's fault to decide how to issue a replacement. When a frantic, hormonal new mom would call me, getting ready to rant and put her foot down, I would always interrupt their story and just ask for their address and what type of bag they wanted and ship it for free. No way am I being paid enough to get in that argument. I don't care if they're carrying large bricks in the bag. Take a new one. To be clear, this was the same response whether people called in upset or not. All I wanted was to get off the phone call and finish work. If you cared enough to call, then you convinced me. I was not interested in arguing with any moms, regardless of the initial demeanor. Yeah, I have complete sympathy with people taking customer complaints, and to be honest, I'm never turned away by these people, so I'd say most of them have the same policy as you. This kind of service can actually pay off significantly in customer loyalty. Last winter, I ordered a few bottles of flavored coffee syrup from a large online retailer. I didn't think the bottles might be glass, and nobody on their end considered that shipping glass bottles of syrup in -20-degree weather may not work out well. Suffice it to say that what arrived in the box was more bulk snow cones with glass chips than bottles of syrup, which also ruined a couple of other items packaged in there. I got in touch with them armed with pictures and expected to have to show them the damage. Instead, within a couple of minutes, I effortlessly had an account credit applied. They offered to ship replacements, but I declined since they would have had the same fate. The result was that not only did I not hesitate to buy more coffee syrup from them, in appropriate weather, but it boosted my confidence in buying any product from them. And I buy a lot of stuff online nowadays. I worked at a hardware store in a garden center making close to minimum wage. We often loaded heavy bags of mulch and dirt for customers in their truck beds and whatnot. We were told that we were not allowed to take tips from customers. So being the good boy that I was, I turned down a couple of tips until one day I loaded up a full customer pickup bed and he handed me $20. I told him I can't take that and he looked me dead in the eye and said, "Do they really pay you so much that you don't need it?" I stopped being an idiot that day. Why the frick I let someone pay me so little and tell me I'm not allowed to make more, and how I listened to that is just embarrassing now. Worked at Target, they had the same store policy. But my manager also said just take it anyway because they had someone complain about someone refusing to take a tip as being rude a week or two prior. Sometimes I'd just buy a box or two of fruit snacks for everyone and toss them in the break room with it. I used to be a cashier at Walmart. No crap, I had someone try to give me a $50 tip for knowing how to do my job properly. I desperately needed it, but I couldn't take it as there are cameras and I was scared crapless that I was going to get fired. He insisted, so I put it in the donation jar. That's so terrible at a low-wage job in which generally customer service can't get paid enough, they can't accept a tip from a customer for providing quality service. I work in retail and part of my job is helping customers load furniture purchases into their car. Unfortunately, most of our customers never really expected to be buying furniture when they came in, just by the nature of where I work, so they oftentimes come in vehicles that are grossly unfit for the job. I've had to help customers try to lift love seats and sofas into the back of their sedans, for example. Well, one day after I'd been there a few weeks, I got called into the furniture department for customer assistance. So I go out there with a flatbed cart and meet the lady who bought a large chest. We get it on the cart and I push it out into the parking lot. Then she points me to her tiny little car. I can immediately tell there's no way in heck it's going to fit, but she's convinced we can make it work. About 20 minutes later, she actually proves me wrong. As we're saying our goodbyes, she pulls a $5 bill out of her wallet and offers it to me. I tell her that I just started there recently, and so I actually wasn't sure if I'm allowed to accept tips. She said something along the lines of, "It'll just be our little secret." And after thinking for a moment, I said, "Frick it, helping her was way more trouble than the $3 I was paid in those 20 minutes. So I took her money, went back inside and casually asked my boss if I was allowed to accept tips. "No," he said. "Don't get yourself fired over an extra $1 or $2. I briefly considered handing him the money and apologizing for accepting it, despite not being sure I was allowed to. Instead, I told him, "Okay, I only ask because that furniture call I just helped with was gonna offer me a tip before she realized she didn't have any cash on her. Made me realize I didn't actually know, so I'm just asking for future reference." Oh no, wouldn't want to lose this minimum wage job taking money offered by thankful customers that in no way costs the business anything. Massive retail corporations really just are the worst, aren't they? Work your minimum wage employees to the bone and flat out block them from taking gifts from grateful customers. No way that I wouldn't take that money. I work at Target and we aren't allowed to do anything to physically stop people from stealing. If someone's trying to be sneaky, we're supposed to say, "I think you forgot that in your cart." But if he wanted to grab something and just walk away with it, only thing we can do is tell asset protection. Back when I worked for Home Depot, one of the guys in hardware watched someone stuff screws and nails and other small items into their pockets. My coworker walked up behind him and scared the frickin' crap out of him by yelling, "So, are you gonna pay for those or what?" He got in huge trouble but wasn't fired, and it was funny as frick watching someone flail about with nails flying out of their pants. Whenever I shop at a department store, I always try to find the most disgruntled-looking cashier. I've had cashier bags that weren't scanned. They didn't care, and I don't say anything. That happened to me at Michael's, a crafts store, a few days before Christmas. The store is absolute hell on earth, and my cashier was a weary, 16-ish-year-old guy who was just done. He had the 1,000-yard stare, poor kid. He was mumbling on about how his girlfriend is mad at him because something about her birthday and how all the customers are just so mean and scary. I don't think he was even talking to me. I think he was just having a stream of consciousness. Anyway, I notice he's just shoving things into a plastic bag, so I say, "I think you forgot to ring some of those things up." He looks at me in a daze and says, "You look like a nice lady and I just can't do this anymore, so here you go." Wow. Thanks, fam. Hope you had a happy holiday. Used to work at a movie theater. No one cares if you bring your own snacks, although it's super aggravating if you just leave your snack garbage at the theater instead of taking it out with you. We usually have an hour window where all the theaters are getting out. We tend to have about 10 minutes per theater to clean on a busy day. Leaving your garbage in your seats makes everything slower. It's not hard to carry it down to the can. I work in an electronics retail store. We have a standard price match guarantee, 14 days with a receipt. I had a woman come in and give me a huge attitude and explain that she brought this TV 2 days ago and paid $3,199 for it, and that one of our competitors had it for $2,999 and she demanded her money back, plus the 10% difference. I made her wait and pretended to check with the manager. Well, when I looked it up, we were currently selling it for $2,500. So I went over with a huge smile and told the mean woman who was giving me dirty looks the whole time, "Sure, Mom, we can match the $2,999 for you and the 10% of their $200 difference." So she walked out thinking she won the battle, paying $2,979 for her TV. When, if she was nice, I would have given it to her for our sale price of $2,499. Being a B-word cost her $480. As a valet, we would reuse tickets and just pocket the cash to park as our tip on slow days. The manager never counted how many cars we parked or how many tickets we used. I was taught this by my coworkers on my first day. It was the only way to make money. Also, I never asked for ID when selling M-rated games to people who looked under 17 at a major retailer. It's not a law, and my supervisor didn't care as he wanted as many sales as he could get. Used to wait tables. People couldn't bring their own drinks, booze, or just water. I honestly didn't care if I saw them bring their own, as ours was way overpriced. One day, this obviously broke couple came in to celebrate something, and they asked for tacos and a big bottle of beer, but were discouraged by the price of the bottle. So I told them they could buy a bottle from the store on the other side of the street. It was half the price, and if it was warm, I could exchange it for one of our cold ones. I think I was too nice to people, though. I've never encountered another waitress or waiter who would be as nice as I was. But meh, it felt good and the bosses could never tell. A coffee shop I worked at was so poorly managed that I practically gave free drinks to the 5 to 7 customers that we actually had on a regular basis. The manager and owner were always in China and the few customers were usually our friends. I even took on double shifts so I'd get paid more. We let the customers do whatever the heck they wanted, and it even got to a point where they played Smash Brothers in the back. They even hung out in the kitchen to cook food. As employees, we probably broke every universal employment law possible. It was the chillest minimum wage job I had, but unfortunately it came to an end when the entire staff except myself decided to go to EDC and my manager happened to show up that one day. About 22 years ago, I worked in a Kmart that had a diner and I was the dishwasher. One day, a waitress came up to me and asked me to clean a mess in the ladies' room. In my ignorance, I'd just assumed someone had spilled the trash or something that innocuous. I opened the door and everything looked fine. I opened the first 2 stalls and everything still looked fine. Then I opened the 3rd stall. Some lady had projectile crapped all over the back wall of the stall. It was a tremendous amount of liquefied crap. So, after dry heaving a number of times, I leave the ladies' room. I informed the head waitress that there was no way in heck I was going to touch that mess. She whined and moaned about it, but I wouldn't budge. She called the store manager down to the restaurant and he started yelling at me to clean up the mess in front of everyone else. I flat out refused and told him to go take a look for himself. I grabbed a dish bucket from the opposite end of the restaurant and on my way back I saw him come out of the restroom. On his way out, he stopped by the hostess and told her to put up an out of order sign. They ended up hiring a professional cleaning service to take care of it. Apparently he didn't get paid enough to deal with that crap either. Non-Americans. What's the craziest rumor you heard about America that turned out to be true? Surfer dudes actually speak like that. Californians actually speak like that too. This video feels like a nice little full circle on my first video with the channel, which was about things that surprised non-Americans about the US. Thanks for watching these last few months, folks. I'm from Quebec, and when we went down to Boston for a school trip, I sneezed in public and heard 2 or 3 people say, "Bless you." Quite a weird rumor I had heard not 2 months prior to that. I thought it was nice.
Wait, you don't say bless you when someone sneezes? I mean, it's not like it means anything, so I could understand why. It just seems so strange not to say anything.
I mean, how else were we supposed to deal with the demons that escape through sneezes? That people actually get attacked by alligators which got in their pools, specifically referring to Florida here. There are boa constrictors in Florida as well. So apparently yellow school buses are actually a thing in America. I honestly thought it was a cartoon thing, but nope. That Dolly Parton has her own theme park in Tennessee. I thought it was a joke. That woman is a saint. She has a book program for children where, once they're born, they'll receive a free children's book once a month until they turn 5. That's amazing!
She absolutely is. She's done amazing things for people, especially where she grew up. She deserves far more credit than she already has. My 2 sons are in that program, and she eats at the Mexican restaurant across the street from my house. I live in Nashville. She's super sweet and down to earth. I always thought that Olive Garden in The Simpsons was just code for generic restaurant. I mean, that's not entirely incorrect. Olive Garden is probably the closest you could get to beige if restaurants were colors. And when I first saw The Big Bang Theory, I thought for years that the Cheesecake Factory was a made-up restaurant. 'Tis such a silly name. If I don't like someone but am still socially obligated to get them a gift, I get them a gift card for Olive Garden or Applebee's. I studied in Maryland for about half a year back in 2017. I'd always heard that Americans are like super good at pie. I was pretty much all alone during Thanksgiving since everyone else was with their families. One of the RAs I'd befriended knocked on my door and bought me all different kinds of pie. Dear Lord, I've never tasted anything that delicious. From blueberry to apple to pumpkin. Every single pie. They were all amazing. I actually don't properly know if this is true, but you have like a whole aisle in your supermarkets dedicated to just the hundreds of cereals you have. Mostly true. It's cereal and other breakfast items like granola and oatmeal, but mostly cereal. All the food is bigger. Free refills.
I'm from Australia, and all my life I believed red Solo cups were like 555 area codes, a Hollywood prop. When I emigrated to the US, my mother-in-law was making dinner and offered me iced tea in a red Solo cup. I lost it, made everyone sign the cup, and I've still got it.
The Solo cup stories always kill me. We had some German exchange students in high school, and one of them loved how many American things were just like in the movies. We rode in the back of a truck to a pizza place for lunch that day, and he was loving it. In the afternoon, there was a party/get-together at someone's house. The kid was eyeing the stack of Solo cups and coyly asked, "Can I keep one?" We said sure, and the red Solo cup was the cherry on top of his American experience that day. Masked people come to your house, knock on your door asking for candy. Mostly it's just packs of kids, but sometimes it's whole families. This was my friend's Halloween culture shock. It's a ton of fun to hang out next to the walkway in a costume, pretending to be one of the decorations and scare people as they walk past you. Sports bars are actually exactly how they're portrayed on the TV. Yeah, just much less attractive people. Drink sizes. Holy crap. When my family visited in 2017, we landed in Texas for a stopover. First thing I saw in the shops, part of the terminal, was a dude who was drinking from what actually looked like an actual frickin' bucket. Here in New Zealand, our large drinks would be considered an American small or maybe medium. We need bigger cups than most of the world since over half the cup is filled with ice. Not exactly crazy, but I wanted to test out the stereotype that Americans will talk to anyone, so I sought out a sports bar on my first visit. Ended up having a ton of really fun conversations with total strangers who I'll never talk to again. It was great. American, I will speak to anyone about anything. I can't even count the number of times I've randomly started conversations with strangers, become friends within 30 minutes, then never spoken to them again. When I started traveling for work, I'd often find myself in bars or on flights and buses alone, so I'd end up starting a conversation so I could have some human interaction. As a Canadian, it amazes me how much people around the world keep to themselves. I go to a big ski hill in the mountains a lot and look forward to chilling on ski lifts, chatting with some of the wise old skier dudes. I have long, heartfelt conversations with random's dads on airplanes, and it's great. Again, naturalized European narrator here, it seems like such a damn culture shock to have random people engage in conversation and have, or at least seem to have, genuine interest in the conversation. It's deeply unnatural, but quite pleasant for us. Biscuits and gravy is a legit thing. Also, you can ride motorcycles without helmets in some states, and your iced tea isn't sweetened unless you ask for sweet. Nothing could have possibly prepared me for the absolute dichotomy of sweet tea versus iced teas in the comments to this. This is evidently very important to many. A good sausage gravy with sage and black pepper, with some good flaky biscuits, is one of the best southern comfort foods, along with a cup of strong, sweet iced tea. Crazy hospitable. Turned out to be true. Talkative. Turned out to be true as well. $2 bills. American state and national parks are some of the most beautiful places on Earth. All parks could use more funding, but American parks are well-staffed and maintained. There's real pride there. I love our national and state park systems. One of my state parks recently got a herd of bison, which I haven't seen in the wild since my trip to Yellowstone. The week I graduate, I'm going to go see them and relax in nature. The minimal amount of paid days off you can get from work. A friend of mine from Wisconsin was very proud he got 20 days off per year. If someone in Germany would offer me only 20 days, I would laugh at him and leave. So student loans. How does it work in the USA? In the UK, when you go to a university, you take out a student loan, and after uni, when you earn a certain amount per year, a percentage above that threshold goes towards paying it back. However, if you don't earn that much, I don't know how much, maybe 20 to 25k per year, then you pay nothing. Then after a while, if you haven't paid it back, 30 years, maybe 40, then it just disappears and you don't have to pay it. In America, do you have to pay regardless of income? Is there a time limit after which debt expires and disappears? No. The only time the debt expires or disappears is if you die or pay it off. Most people have co-signers, which tend to be parents or family members, so even if they die, the co-signer will be forced to pay the student loan debt, on top of dealing with the loss of a loved one. Americans are nice and will stop to talk to strangers. Canadian here, living in Alberta. To anyone who's never been, you'll be blown away by the general Americans' generosity of their time, knowledge, and helpfulness. I've done a few summers of road trips from Calgary. One time I went to as far east as Ohio, Tennessee, as far south as New Orleans and Dallas, went through the flatlands, and rode up the Rockies the rest of the way home. I have visited almost all the landlocked states, 5 more to go, and 4 along the Gulf states, all by car. I've been through a lot of big American cities and a lot of tiny towns. All of you, north to south, make Canadians look like bloody savages. I expected something worse, probably because of television and internet. I ended up leaving your country after the first time I visited, blown away and with a newfound very real love for my southern neighbors. Been 5 times on multi-week trips. We'll spend time and money there again. 10 out of 10. America has libraries that are essentially free to use. This was not even a rumor, but more like a sarcastic comment from a friend who heard I was excited to go to the US, because he knew what book nerds my entire family are. When I first arrived here 25 years ago, the first day of work at Newark, New Jersey, I walked out at lunchtime and saw the huge central library.
The size boggled my mind, but I bravely walked in to check it out. The guy says, "Yep, show me your work ID or local address, and you get a membership card." Me? "How much does it cost? I only own $80 until I get my first pay." Him? Bemused, almost laughing. "It's free. You don't pay for anything." It took me some time to recover from the shock of this. "So, how many books am I allowed to take home?" I was expecting that to be a catch. Maybe I need to put down a security deposit for each book. He was now positively enjoying himself. How many can you carry? That day I took home 30+ books, just being greedy, and quickly called my dad to tell him about it. For a guy who painstakingly would browse used bookstores in small-town India just to get his kids great books to read, he was suitably amazed. He was puzzled if it would kill the bookstore business, because who'd buy if such great free libraries existed? Up to the present day, I feel such gratitude for being able to come here, and when Dad visited some years later, I would drop him off at a library on my way to work, and he'd be lost in it all day. To address some of the questions people are now sending me, yes, by take home I meant borrowed to return. Carrying those books home has a story too. The librarian saw my dilemma and wanted to stick to his original "how many can you carry" comment, and would not allow me to discard any, so went off and got me 2 large bags made of cloth or canvas, like grocery bags. And when I lugged all of that on the train back to New Jersey that evening, I had to walk home from the train station, no car, to a mile away. Normally not bad, but with those books, it was tedious. A cop saw me and gave me a lift home. He loved my story about the library too. India today is slightly better, but as a kid in a small town, the only library I saw was at my school, where books were never allowed to be taken home. And then there was this single shop where you subscribed to borrow some pulp fiction. The Asiatic Library in Bombay was big. I saw it when I visited my cousins, but it had a wait list, I think, of 4 years, because they couldn't handle too many members. I'm always amazed at what all libraries offer. I took my parents for a movie showing once, set up as a once-a-month thing for seniors, and they were shocked that it was free. And they were giving away cookies and stuff too, along with pleasant company. My girls have learned to love the library as much as I do, and probably have read more books than most kids at school. My daughter won an award for some accelerated reading, and at age 9 gave a speech about the impact of libraries for her, and how much her dad and grandpa loved them. Thank you, libraries and librarians. This started off as a simple praise of America's libraries, but turned into a really cute, fresh-off-the-boat story that would probably make a number of people want to move to the land of the free. Maybe do your research first, though, folks. As an American, I think you could ask the title question to Americans, 'cause there are some weird friggin' states, man. Dry counties, cities where places aren't allowed to be open on a Sunday, or there can only be certain hours on Sunday. Not being able to pump your own gas. Whoa, there are places where you can't pump your own gas? I feel like I'm an idiot for not knowing this. Oregon here, can confirm. Afraid to drive outside the state because I don't know how to pump my own gas. That you can identify Texans with the simple phrase, "The stars at night are big and bright," and someone else will go, "Deep in the heart of Texas." That Hawaiians really like Spam. Yeah, and there's a perfectly good reason for it too. After Pearl Harbor, the effects of World War II started in the US and rationing became a thing. Well, it turns out that it's kind of hard to get fresh rations to an island that imports a lot. So, for meat, they had to make do with Spam. Human ingenuity prevails and dishes were made, and that's how Hawaii learned to love Spam. The honking. I thought it was a movie stereotype. Then I went to New York. It's rare outside the big cities though, in my opinion. If you think that's bad, try going to India. Parents were from the USSR. They were freaking shocked about how nice you Americans are. They said that y'all were a weird type of nice, but nice regardless. It didn't even matter that they were from the USSR, moved to the States post-collapse. You Americans seemed to accept them anyway. I, American, had such a pleasant interaction with a tourist from Russia the other day, in Walmart of all places. I saw a man that clearly looked confused in the auto section, so I walked toward him and he tried to explain what he was looking for, but he hardly spoke any English at all. So I pulled my phone out to use Google Translator and told him to speak into my phone. The translation came back that he was looking for detergent for bugs in love bed, so I took him to an aisle to look for bed bug killer. He looked so confused and pulled out a piece of paper that had "Love Bug Wash" written on it in English, so I took him back to the auto section and helped him pick out some car soap. He kept saying, "God bless," to me. We laughed a lot through the process, and I thought it was so cool that we could speak different languages but still communicate.
To clarify, love bug is a type of fly. We call them love bugs because after mating, adult pairs remain coupled, even in flight, for up to several days, like they're in love. But we get them in huge numbers during mating season, spring or summer. Because of this, a lot of cars will be covered in these love bugs that they ran into the road. This is Florida, by the way. Sorry, I let this one get quite far off track, because I was so interested in the gosh darn love bugs. Also, why do all the weirdest things seem to converge on Florida? They have milk in gallon cartons. When I visited America, I went to a supermarket for some breakfast stuff, cereal and milk. All they had was milk in gallons. Who could possibly have that much milk? I asked for a smaller carton, and the lady who worked there just laughed at me and asked me if we just don't like milk in England very much. Many supermarkets have half gallons and quarter gallons, but honestly, I'm surprised that it's an issue. I live alone and go through a gallon of milk in just a few days. I drink at least 7 gallons a day to ensure I get enough calcium. That American kids eat straight sugar. Walked onto the playground and saw kids chugging these long, thin sticks. I'd try and it was just colored sugar. They called them pixie sticks. Oh boy, wait till you find out about Fun Dips. You have a hard candy stick, so all sugar, that you lick and then dip into a colored sugar sack to make it stick to the sugar stick. Then you lick the sugar powder off the sugar stick. After you finish all the powder, you eat the stick. Before I came to the States, as we called it, I lived in Germany. The area I lived in had no fireflies. So when I got to the States, I did not believe my eyes, as I finally saw fireflies light up the world as I fell asleep. I also thought that New York City was a popular fictional city. I didn't believe it actually existed. At the time, it seemed too large and extraordinary to possibly exist. For those talking about other countries, I didn't know there were other countries at the time either. I only knew of places I had lived, which was Germany and soon to be the US. I was never told about the concept of countries until I went to an American school. The "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" song that's apparently sung at baseball games. Still not entirely sure that guy wasn't taking the mickey out of me. Female here. I've been in bathrooms where the gap between the stall and the door is so big I felt the need to cover it with my purse just to get some privacy. The absolute worst is when some mother brings her grubby-handed son into the bathroom and you see a freaking 8-year-old's eye staring at you from the other side of the door. That your country is huge. I got off the plane and asked the cab guy how far the hotel was, and he said about 30 miles. I almost had a heart attack. Turns out cabs are cheaper than the UK though. I can't remember the price I paid, but I was pleasantly surprised. The UK cabs are like £4 per mile. Also, you would get laughed out of the taxi for asking to go 30 miles and not taking the train. Not really crazy, but I just learned you guys have like outdoor sirens that get tested somewhat frequently. I've only heard those noises in video games and movies until my friend sent me a clip, because I had no idea it actually happened. In many areas of the US, these sirens are used to warn of impending severe weather and potential tornadoes. Sirens are tested on the first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. around Chicago. My dad heard this crazy rumor about everyone getting drunk and wearing green for one day a year. He obviously didn't know this was a holiday and was like, WTF. When he came to the US and he discovered St. Patrick's Day, he was amazed. My dad is from China, for you affronted Irish people. St. Patrick's Day in the US is an excuse for ordinary Americans to act the way that middle-aged Londoners act when on holiday in Dublin, only with more plastic leprechaun hats and glitter. Yeah, and on top of that, suddenly everyone's part Irish. When I say suddenly part Irish, I'm not implying everyone's lying. A lot of them are probably telling the truth since there's so many Irish Americans. What I meant is that no one mentions this fact until St. Patrick's Day. People of Walmart. One of the nicest people in one of the towns I lived in is pictured on People of Walmart. He's known as Willie the Pimp, or just Mr. Willie. Older gentleman, just likes to dress flashy because it makes people smile to see beautiful things. Before he got too old to drive, you could spot his car by the flower arrangements he attached to the side of the front bumper. As a Brit living in America, the amount of pharmaceutical commercials on TV is creepy. Smiling person living life to the fullest. Narrator? Side effects include anal bleeding, gigantism, lupus, skin shedding, and death. Ask your doctor about Prolax today. The SAT exam being multiple choice. Multiple choice exams in general. That you can get into university just by being good at sports. Like what the frick? Yep, most schools have academic and athletic scholarships, not just academic ones. It's not always a full ride, and you still have to qualify academically, which is occasionally a problem, but that's usually a bare minimum baseline.
The reason is that college sports are almost as popular as professional sports, especially football and basketball. Those sports bring money and fame to players and schools, so it's common for schools to try and get the best players to commit. The school I went to, UVA, won the most recent college basketball championship, and now they're well known around the US. Nearly every man is circumcised regardless of religion. Checking in, Catholic. Am snipped. I had an interaction with a British friend online where I said that something looks like a flaccid pee-pee, and he was really confused. When I traced over what I was saying, we realized that I was picturing a flaccid, circumcised pee-pee, and he, being more familiar with the uncut variety, hadn't seen what I did. It was the first time I realized that other parts of the world wouldn't be inclined to circumcise every male child. Now I'm just not sure why it's so pervasive in the US to begin with. They have garbage disposals in their kitchens. That's so wild to me. To clarify, I'm from the UK. I'm aware that they're not the same as bins or trash cans and that they're mainly for food waste and scraps. I'm also delighted that they're called garberators in Canada. Homeowners associations. What the frick is up with that? The place that my wife and I bought came with a busybody of an HOA president. We got a fricking note stapled to our gate that said our clothes line had to be removed because it was an eyesore. So I wrote back and told her about how crappy our dryer is, and that we're in the fricking desert anyway, so hanging them up is the most environmentally friendly way to dry clothes anyway. Still got another note during laundry day the following week, so I stapled a note to her door that said, "If you want me to have a good dryer, then buy me one. Otherwise, kindly F off." Haven't heard from her since, not even a note. Hope she's okay. When you sail west, you arrive in America and not India. Then why do they call them Indians? Phew, this guy. Can you really just buy a Glock at Walmart? At my local Walmart, you can bring your car in for an oil check, get an eye exam, get a haircut, eat lunch at the in-store Subway, purchase a Glock, purchase groceries, purchase a frickin' couch, then go home once the background check for the Glock is finished and the oil change is done. Other things I forgot to add, you can purchase alcohol depending on state. You can get your taxes done there, you can get your birthday cake made, print pictures from a USB, phone, etc., get dog tags made, get spare keys made, rent movies, pick up a full-course meal for dinner at the deli. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description too. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.